Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining me just for a few minutes here while I take a little drive. I wanted to go over the latest release that Dan Hennon put out regarding David Crowley. Just adjust that a little bit. Okay, so what we have here is David Crowley filled out a application to be a part of the cast for a TV show called Doomsday Preppers for season 3. Excuse me. So he filled out a casting questionnaire, and I think there's a lot of good information in this questionnaire that is worth going over. And since I had a few minutes here, I figured I'd just kind of briefly touch on it and go over some of the information in this document. How about that? And try to avoid traffic and not get hit and all that good stuff is always good as well. So, Doomsday Prepper Season 3 casting questionnaire. And this is obviously filled out by David Crowley when he was 27, so about 2 years before he died. And his phone number is the old phone number, his old cell phone number ending with 0461. I believe that's the one of the phones that was turned off after Kamel's dad and David and Kamel had some type of an issue where Kamel's dad was originally paying for both of their cell phones. He was paying for David's phone and for Kamel's phone. And I think that also shows how close that Kamel's family was to David. And I think that's a big valuable point there, that they had a good relationship, so good that Kamel's dad actually gave David a car, I believe, for one of his birthdays. So that's interesting too. I believe that's a silver car that was found at the house. So David is 27 at this time. Email is the Crawls04 Gmail. The occupation, he put filmmaker, videographer, photographer. It says list your family members, name and age. Kamel 26, Rania 3. So that gives you a good idea. That would have been interesting, I think, if David would have been a part of that TV show. I don't know what the issue was, but I know that season 3 came out in October of 2013. So this had to have been filled out before then. Obviously, I don't know how much before. That's not clear from this document here, but at least a couple months, maybe even a year before. I'm not really sure. So I've never seen this show. It's on National Geographic. So if you have the Disney Plus app, you can actually watch it. And I've been thinking about maybe watching a couple of them just to get an idea of what it was like, of what the TV show was like, and how David would have fit in or how he would have not fit into that TV show. I think that will give me a better understanding of that. Moving along here, he puts his address. This is the apartment, the Bloomington apartment is where he was, and some suburban kind of area. This is, when did you start prepping? Was there a time, event, or something significant that caused you to prep? And if you look at David's pantry, you can obviously see all of the different prepping stuff that he was involved with. I'm just gonna maneuver this. Sorry, it's just a little annoying there, but hopefully it's not too bad, and hopefully the battery doesn't die. So his answer is general awareness of world events coupled with contextual knowledge from military experience in late 2010 led to me being more concerned about general preparedness. Research for my current film project made me aware that the many prepper scenarios are far from fictitious. So that all lines up with the story with David Crowley's Gray State, obviously. And next question, what kind of security defense training do you have? Were you in the military? David says, served in Army infantry from 2004 to 2009, multiple combat tours. I also do ongoing firearms tactical training and have even extended this training to actors for my films. I am proficient in combat gear and field craft. Do you have any skill sets? Do you have any kind of skill sets is the next question. And his answer is obviously firearms and small unit tactics, room clearing, urban combat. That's his skill sets, urban combat. And that gives you an idea of kind of what David was doing during his tours that we've talked a lot about. And I think that's a very important thing too for David's tours. All right, next question, we're gonna go along here, is going to be we got the skill sets. How long will your food storage last? What kind of foods do you store? And it's currently have 2 years of stored food, dried goods, wheat, MREs, cans, seed banks for planting. And you can see that down in David Crowley's basement in the big pantry. There's tons of stuff like that in there. And we should all have stuff like that. 2 years is really good of storable foods. I have some storable foods that have a shelf life of like 25 years or something, but I don't know if that would last necessarily. I mean, I couldn't live off that for 2 years, but that's important to have as well. How many and what kind of weapons ammo have you stored? Do you have stored? He's got an AR-15 with 7,000 rounds, 40 cal pistols with several hundred rounds, AK-47 with 500 rounds, M1A with 500 rounds, and Remington 700 rifles with 500 rounds. That's a lot. Do you have a bug out location is the next question. If so, how far away is it from your home? Is it underground? It says my bug out location is 60 miles from my home. 60 miles from my home in the quasi countryside. It is not underground, but I'm working on it. So there is a scene in the latest, in the May 12th version of David Crowley's script, and his main character does end up going to a bug out area where he meets up with some other people from that bug out area. So I thought that that was kind of interesting, and it is kind of a countryside area as well. In the script, the main character doesn't stay there for very long, but you could tell that's the bug out area, that's the safe zone for him. So I thought that was interesting. What kinds of alternative energy do you have? And he says, presently none. However, my budget location has multiple propane tanks and a wood stove heater hookup. So that's good too. He's got something ready. Is there anything, let's see, is there anything else you are stockpiling that is not mentioned above? Medical supplies, comfort items is what he says. Medical supplies, comfort items, canned goods, books, knowledge, fuel treatment additives. Currently on a rotation cycle with clothing and footwear to maintain a supply of broken in but usable items, cash and silver. So that's pretty good. Do you have any conflicts with friends or family about prepping? This is a very important question. And it's just, he says, general eye rolling, resistance to cooperation. And I think for the season, I think they like that. I have not seen the show yet, so I'm just guessing here. But I'm guessing the more conflict between the prepper and the prepper's family is generally what a show like that is probably looking for. They want to really capitalize on that to create that drama and create that TV sense. But I think a lot of this shows that David Crowley was in the he was trying to get his foot into the Hollywood door. We know he was not just a filmmaker but an actor, so he was acting in several projects too. And I think, you know, I think he would have done well in the Hollywood realm if he could have kept his morals about him. I think he would have done really well. It's not hard. I mean, it's not easy to do, obviously, but just a guess. I don't know. Let's see. Is there anything else you are stockpiling that is not mentioned? But, oh, yeah, we already covered that. General eye rolling. Have you ever built anything from scratch before? If so, what is it? Now, I was hoping to hear him say about movie props, some type of props that he had built, because I had wondered about the Bohemian Grove owl statue that's in his office bedroom, and I wondered if he had, you know, used that, or if he had built that as a prop, because on a short film called Into the Void, he is credited with a couple things, but props are also one of them. So I was just kind of guessing. Anyways, I'm still on the hunt to figure out the origin of that Bohemian Grove owl statue. I believe I've asked Mason Hendricks and maybe a couple other people, what is with that owl? Never really got a clear answer. I don't know if they know, but I just always thought that was a pretty odd thing to have in your home. So let's see. So the answer to that, he says, no, not that nothing I can think of offhand, but I am learning to do such things like hydroponic setup or vehicle additions. Interesting. So the next question is, what would you like to build that's unique and would make your preps better? And he says, custom vehicles stripped to rugged essentials. I want to turn my bug out location into a self-sustaining compound with water, solar, and gardening. Next question is, do you have any projects or goals you want to complete soon? Any DIY prepper tips to share? My current project is to build long-term rugged cases that hold rifles and the necessary gear tools to switch out components for different applications. That's pretty interesting. Again, probably not something you're going to do if you're having PTSD and, you know, about to kill your family and all that stuff. But again, it's just par for the course with some of these people and with some of this stuff that we are seeing here. So it's nothing too concerning. Let's go past this car here. Okay, last one is list the top 3 events you are preparing for, you are prepping for. And the answer is the collapse of the dollar, number 1, and the long-term societal degradation, economic depression. That's number 1, and that's a big part. That is the basis around David's script. That is the environment, the world that we are dropped into in David's script. That's where the whole thing starts. They're already there. The dollar has already fallen. Riots are happening. The government is having a hard time controlling the populace, and at the same time they are battling all of these endless wars overseas. So a lot of distractions, I guess, and more of a globalized world government than one that we see here. Number 2 is solar flares wiping out the electrical grid. That's a big one too, because I remember back in 2012, that was a huge thing that people were talking about. I remember a lot of people talking about that. Solar flares, all of a sudden the power grid, boom, it's gone. What are you going to do? All power gone. How could we live? How would we work? How would everything operate? We'd have to go back to paper. You know, we'd have to go back to I mean, now there would be a digital revolution. All these people who, I'm sure they'd figure out a way to create other energy sources. So I don't think that the New World Order wants to do that. I don't think they want to drop the power grid, because very quickly, very clearly, they will see how these innovative people can come up with new ways to create power. So I don't think that they'll do that, but I mean, it's definitely possible, and it would shut things down for a lot of people for a long time. So it would be a big sign that a big takeover is coming. Number 3 would be the government crackdowns on dissenters and otherwise self-reliant people, and that's the last part of that. And that is the biggest one, I think. Government dissenters. And when they say that, you know, that's a loaded term, obviously, but you can tell what he's thinking about, what he's talking about there, because he was a United States soldier and saw a lot of different things. Comes home and sees what our government is doing here, and can see the progress of this one world order, of this power structure. And he saw it firsthand. He was part of it and chose to get out of it. So we were, but we still are very concerned about the government taking away our rights and putting people into FEMA camps, loading us up, putting us into these camps where basically we don't have any rights. And then from the camps, which is in the Gray State script too, once they're in those camps, then they're separated out into different places, and they go, you know, certain people go into this place, certain people go there. There's other places in the script where they're not really sure where people are going, but they're not staying in the camps necessarily. The camps are just kind of not a meeting ground, but basically it's where they, you know, it's right before they sort out these criminals, these people, to go into different areas, area A, area B, C, etc., etc. So it's an interesting concept, and I just, you know, I want to thank Dan Hennon for finding that, for getting that, and whoever gave it to him, I want to thank that person too. I think it's, you know, it's these little things like this that might seem, you know, like nothing, but there's a lot of good gems in there. There's a lot of good data, I think, that you know, it might not necessarily answer questions, but it does give us more insight into who David was during that time and what he was doing during that time. I believe there was another TV show too that he was trying to get involved in too. So who knows? But definitely his goal was the Hollywood route, and he was moving towards that. And I think that that's very clear where David was going, where he was moving, and what the plans were, and that he was actively planning for the future, and the future was not in Minnesota. Very important stuff there. So anyways, just wanted to kind of go over that. I hope everybody gets a chance to read that. You can read that in the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group, and I'd be curious to hear everybody's views. I'll try to put a link at the bottom of this video if you want to read that, download it yourself, and share your thoughts on it. You know, it's good to hear other people's thoughts, and I think for me it's just more of him planning for the future. Less proof that he was crazy, less proof that he had any PTSD. Again, I don't think he'd be working on all this stuff. If he did have PTSD, he would not be working on all these projects. So I think that that's a big point there as well. And until we meet again, good peeps, God bless you all, and I will see you then. All right, and I also wanted to just kind of check in with everybody, make sure you're all doing good. I know we haven't done a conference call in a while with everything going on. You know, it's just been, there's just a lot happening right now, and I'm sure all of you are having, you know, life issues as well. And I hope everybody's doing good, staying safe, doing whatever you can to stay safe during this time. Hopefully we'll get back to normal life at some point. I believe the group is, you know, at 3,400 members right now. We've got a lot of new people posting, a lot of good posts there, and a lot of good topics. And I would just want to thank everybody who has joined, everybody who is trying to find out what the truth is in regards to David Crowley and his family. we're just going to keep on pushing on until we get the case reopened. And there's nothing there. I haven't heard anything new from Jim Gummert, so I'm still waiting for that, waiting for some updates. We just put out the Gray Stage podcast number 4, and I really enjoyed that one. Looking forward to the next one. I believe the next one, episode number 5, we're going to cover the medical examiners and the autopsies. So I hope to get everybody back involved for that podcast. I've even been thinking about maybe doing that one. That would be episode number 5. I'm thinking about doing that one live, maybe as a YouTube simulcast, if possible. We'll see how that goes. But I would love to be able to do one of these live here. We put a new one out every month on Anchor.fm, I believe, and it syncs out to Spotify, to Google Play, to a lot of other places too. I think Stitcher, some of those, but you can always get it. You can download it. We should have somewhere on one of our websites a direct download option, but we'll work on that. It's just timing, and it's, there's so much happening, and I've been looking at, like I said, laying the groundwork for a possible second book on this that kind of goes into more deeper into the topics that are mentioned there. I didn't put anything about Kenneth Maines really in there, so I think that would be good to cover all of that. Some of the conversations with Kamel's sister, maybe go into more in depth about that. The conversations I had with Mason Hendricks, there's a lot of stuff there, and a ton of other things that just for whatever reason did not make it into this particular book, to this first book. The financial records, I thought, was one of the weaker points of my book. There could have been a lot more about that in there. David Crowley's phones still being paid for and operational. What happened to their cars? What happened to who owns the Gray State? That big battle, how there was some internal wars, some internal struggles between the Gray State quote-unquote team and what they were going to do with all of that stuff, with the footage. Who's running the Gray State YouTube page right now? Who's running the social media, the Facebook? Who's running all of that right now? How can these people say that David Crowley is this murderer, child killer, everything, and then they want to turn around and use his project, use his stuff, and act like they had a big role in creating it and taking it to the level that it made? And if they did, then they would be able to do that with other projects. They'd be able to do that with other things, and just not seeing that. But the Hollywood aspirations of the Gray State team is very similar to what David's was, and it's very clear that that was their goal, is to get this project, Gray State, to do something big with it, to get it onto a massive level. And the TV show was working out. These guys were not going to be part of that. How were they going to explain that when people asked? They'd just be on the sidelines. Everything would have been kind of quiet. One of the major things about the script, as we've talked about a couple times, is that Danny Mason's character is not in it. He's gone. He's not part of it. So I thought that was very interesting tidbit. Where's his character going? David and Danny are in this legal battle. This the very early stages of a legal battle to see who is going to get the rights to what. David Crowley had no issue giving Danny Mason the rights to Danny Mason's character, because his character wasn't going to be in the script, and that's at least since May 12, 2014. Danny Mason's character is gone. Now, you could say that the main character in the script is basically Danny Mason's character. You could say that. I don't know. Only David knows. But we know that the character that is in the legal documents going back and forth between David wanted Danny Mason to sign, that character is not there. So Danny Mason would have been free to do something else with that character. I don't know. That's a whole nother issue. It's just a big mess, and it's a huge mess, and we don't really know. I don't know what all of those details are. I can just say, well, this is what this document says. This is what they were talking about. There's emails going back and forth between David and Danny, and they're very hostile, and not very friendly. And it's like, is Danny Mason stalling? What is he stalling for, if that's true? Is David Crowley stalling? Why isn't David Crowley being honest with Danny Mason about his character not being in it? Saying that he's going to give Danny Mason rights. Then it's with the documentary, it gets even worse, because then it's, they want the documentary. Danny Mason wants it, and I'm sure a lot of the other Gray State guys want it too. And David sounds like he was ready and willing to give that up, to give them that, and a lot of the other stuff that they had already done, a lot of previous stuff. But it was, the things going forward that David Crowley was more focused on, moving forward. Again, more proof that David Crowley is moving forward. He's not looking back. He's moving forward constantly. So I think that's another big point that sometimes gets overlooked. He's moving forward. He is contemplating, turning this into a TV series. And yet, if you were to listen to what the friends told Kamel's sister, it made it seem like the project was dead. Kamel's sister probably really thought the project was dead, and that's because she listened to people that she should not have been listening to. Those were the same people that ended up tricking her when it came to Eric Nelson's film, A Gray State. And I think by that point, according to the interview I did with Kamel's friend, by that point, I think Sidra pretty much knew that these guys were not being upfront with her, and the games that they played with her and with her dad, all of that stuff. And I just think it's because they trusted these guys to be sincere, to be honest, and to really do something good with this work, and they didn't. They got burned. And so, if anybody tries to move forward, from what Kamel's sister said, if anyone tries to move forward with the project, they're going to have to deal with Kamel's family. We still don't know the details about Kamel's mom, only that she's doing better. And the chemo must have worked. Aside from that, we really don't know too much about it. So we'll just keep on pushing on, and we'll document it. We'll document all the facts, all of the lies, everything that people want to say will all be documented to make sure that it's accurate. And if it's not, they're going to get called out on it. Then it becomes, well, okay, where did this information come from? Sidra was saying that David was on the ground doing some type of a ritual. Where did that information come from? There's no evidence in that crime scene of any ritual or anything like that. Sean Wright has said that David Crowley was on the ground playing with the blood of his wife. Where is that coming from? Are they just making this shit up? So think whatever you want, but I mean, just all of the false stuff. Oh, there was footprints. Mason Hendricks, you know, they had footprints that match David. That's not true. They had fingerprints that match. That's not true. None of that is true. Kamel's sister probably doesn't know that. Probably has never read those documents. And if she has, then she should know better. She should be asking the same questions. Where in the documents? Where is it proven in the documents that David Crowley is guilty? That's a simple question that they all should be asking, all of them. And if you don't think that one day Kamel's family, even the younger generations, if you don't think that one day they're going to be asking those questions and demand answers, you're crazy. Of course they are. They're going to want to know. They're going to want to know. People just want to know what the truth is. Not my truth. Not your truth. They're not interested in my theories. They're not interested in your theories. They're interested in the facts. They're interested in what proves David Crowley guilty. Until you have that, you will not move. You will not be able to move on. You will continue to have the bad dreams. You will continue to have those bad thoughts, waking up, shaking. It will continue. All of that will continue. That darkness, that cloud that hovers over your family will be there until you decide that enough is enough. Let's reopen this case. Let's get some answers, and let's put some real closure to this. Let's not put a blanket over this. Let's put some closure around this case and get some closure for everybody. For all the people that love David, for all the people that loved his wife and his daughter. And, you know, for everybody who has respect for our soldiers, for every filmmaker, for every future filmmaker, for everybody who loves what David did, who loves his film, what he put out there, for everyone who cares about children, even if you don't care about David, his wife, you don't care about the movie, conspiracies, all that stuff. Don't you care about what happened to this child? I mean, to me, that's a big, big thing. What happened to this child? And why are we to believe that it's just basically David, he's guilty, and that's it? You know, I don't think that that's right. I don't think that that's fair to just jump to that conclusion and to stay there. I'll try to move over here if I can. Let's see if this works. I don't know if this will work or not. Probably not. Alright, well, I guess I'll just go ahead and wrap this part up here too, but I do want to thank you all for joining me, and hopefully we'll have another conference call coming up soon, and we'll get back on track, and we'll be able to go live one of these days. I still need to finish the little some more videos on David's script. Maybe I'll get to that Sunday. I'm not really sure. It's just all time with everything else and all the work, the regular life projects and all that stuff. It's all in progress, so you don't want to burn out, and you just gotta have a balanced life, balance all this stuff out, and that's it. Don't worry about what people say. I'm not a credible person. I have no credibility, so I'm not worried about that. Not worried about anything like that. Never have been, never will be, by the way. So I just just a funny little inside joke there. So God bless you all. I hope you all have a great day. Stay safe. Don't do anything that I wouldn't do. Stay focused on Jesus Christ, and remember, David Crowley is innocent because he can never be proven guilty. Nobody has proven him guilty. Let's get the case reopened so that we can get some justice for this family, and so that there can be some closure. Even if it's partial closure, would just be to say that David Crowley is not guilty. And that's where we are. And as long as we keep the case going, as long as we don't let it die out, then David Crowley remains innocent, and we win, good peeps. All right. God bless you all. Have a great day.
Yeah, let me know when we're live, guys.
Yo, what up, everybody? Welcome to Ancient Visions with me, Gaz.
and Ross from Planet X Films. Joining us today are Greg Fernandez and Dan Hennanen. And I just want to hand it over to everybody. If you could start your intros for today.
Yeah, if you guys want to set us off, Greg.
It would probably help if I unmute myself. I want to say
that would be tremendously helpful.
Hi to everybody. It's been one of those days. I can just say that there's so much happening, and I just think that this case is so relevant right now. There's a few things you could take out of this case, and just I think this will be. I hope this will be a good show. I haven't talked about the Gray State script yet, so I don't I'm looking forward to talking about this. I'm going to grab my notes here, and I just hope everybody will keep and just think about this case. Think about David Crowley. Think about what they are telling us. Think about all of the facts that show that David Crowley is not guilty, and just keep an open mind. I'm going to open up my blinders here to get me a little more sunshine, because we need that.
First things first, Greg, can you let everybody know where to find you, your Gray Stage recent book, you guys' group, and just your channels, just whatever social media, best places for people to find you guys. And we'll put them in the link as well.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the best place would be to go to the Gray Stage, or go to, what is it, thegraystage.wordpress.com, and that will take you to where you can either purchase the book, or you can actually download that book free. And so it was very important for people, and Dan's got the book up now, but the main thing is this is all data based on all of the documents that we got, based on photos, based on people that we personally talked to, and so I just would hope that people will read this book, and then you can come to your own conclusion about if you think David Crowley is guilty or not. But I do think that the biggest problem is that people just aren't looking at the facts of this case. They're going on feelings, and we can't do that with this. When we're talking about a former soldier who is we're told that he killed himself, he killed his wife, he killed his daughter. Hands are missing. Most of the heads are gone. His daughter's arm is completely gone. No way. There's definitely something more here.
Absolutely. And the man of the hour, who pretty much pioneered a lot of the case research, Dan Hennanen, please let everybody know, introduce yourself, let everyone know where to find you.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Dan Hennanen. I created the Justice for David Crowley and a family Facebook group that many of you are already on. I can also be reached on YouTube at DM Hennanen, or on my website at uglytruth.info. So, yeah, it's very interesting. The Facebook page just went over 3,000 members here in the month of March, and so this has been 5 years running that we've been running this page and this group, and it's never really hit a lull where it's been nothing going on. There's always been something going. There's been high spots and low spots, but now I think since this coronavirus came out and everyone's been quarantined and told to stay at home and in lockdown, we can hardly keep up with the number of members coming through, because I think people are watching that Netflix movie called A Gray State, and it's driving so many members to our page. So we're thankful for that. We don't endorse that documentary at all as it is propaganda, but it's certainly the direct driver to driving people to our page and to our site. So we thank you for that.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much to cover. I mean, I'm not sure where you guys want to go directly in. I mean, Gray State, I mean, it's been covered you guys have kind of covered that a few times. So, I mean, I really only think we need to gloss over that if people have specific questions. Me personally, since I'm on the writing side, I wouldn't mind getting into the new script that Dan recently released for us in the group. You guys can check that out under files. Unless you have anything that you have any questions for the guys you want to start off with, guys. It's totally up to you guys. It's going to be free form, so.
Yeah, it's pretty free flowing. I just want to say to people as well, if they're watching now live on YouTube, you can drop your questions in the comments section. Bear in mind, my typing is really slow thanks to COVID-19. Hand is severely cracked open with all the constant washing, but I can read your questions and pop them to the guys as well. But I think the writing side of things would be a great place to start.
And I can answer the questions, even though my answer might be gibberish. So I think I'm willing to get into this screenplay because I have a lot of feedback on this, and I found it to be in a super unfinished form. Now, it's not uncommon for short films to go through 20 or 30 like completely full 100% revisions. So, and we really don't know what status this was. I mean, I guess Dan, if you want to start us off with any extra information you have on the two revisions that you were able to obtain.
So for the newer listeners out there that aren't familiar with it, the Gray State was a project with David Crowley and a group of individuals that got together to work on a movie, an actual film. And so what they did was they didn't make a film, but instead produced a trailer, a 2.5-minute trailer that they released to the internet on YouTube, and to this day has how many? Over 2 million views on that.
Yeah, I think it's north of 3 last time I checked.
Over 3 million. So it's done very good, very professionally, and it was out there. And then they were using that trailer to pitch for investors and pitching it to Hollywood producers to see who would pick up on it and fund them to be able to get it out there and get it into what they wanted to have it go on the big screen. Have it be a Hollywood movie. Well, they didn't get the funding, and it was never made into a movie. So David Crowley and his family were killed before that happened. So the question was, on our page, most of the questions that come in as new members are saying, can you send us a link to the movie? Can you send a link to this? We want to see the movie. Well, Greg and I and others on the page, the first thing we got to say is to make sure that they understand that there is no movie. They never made the movie. Now, the Gray State group made a documentary that was released a couple years after the deaths called Gray State: The Rise.
Right.
So they have a documentary called The Rise. And then as a propaganda piece, the media came in and got some guys from Hollywood to make a documentary about this Gray State case, the David Crowley case. That's called A Gray State. And it's got nothing to do with us. Greg and I, we happen to be in it for a couple of short sentences in the documentary, but it was pitched to us that they were going to really expose this case and blow the lid off what really happened in this documentary.
Yeah, big deep dive.
Much like what I was expecting after seeing the movie Soaked in Bleach about Tom Grant and the Kurt Cobain case, where there's so many movies and documentaries done on the Cobain case, and some are misinfo, some are disinfo, and finally this movie Soaked in Bleach came out on an actual documentary that got into the facts that proved Kurt Cobain didn't kill himself. So when we got proposed, approached to do this documentary that was really going to really open things up, I, for one, jumped at the chance. Greg was more hesitant, thinking, we might be being used and being thrown under the bus on this whole case. And so ultimately, he was right, because they did use us to focus on, to discredit us as conspiracy theorists who don't know what we're doing. And they put in a bunch of cherry-picked videos of David Crowley and his wife looking like nut jobs, people who drank and did drugs and were in a domestic violence relationship. They put all that together to paint David Crowley as a bad guy. So that's the documentary that's out there. That's the real deal from Hollywood. But Gray State has this documentary called The Rise, which is actually pretty good. That's 2.5 hours long. But there is no Gray State movie. So people want to see the movie. There was no movie. It was never even made. Now they pitched it. They pitched this information to a producer and to a group that did purchase it and wanted to move forward with it as a web-based series, but it didn't get any farther. The amount of that was being tossed around was a $30 million deal to get this turned into something to make it into the television homes to the public. And so we always thought, what's the chance of us getting that script? And the Gray State guys and us began clashing right away after we started exposing the anomalies in this case. So we knew they weren't going to give it to us or even get it, because I think that some of the members wanted to take that script and move it into and pitch it to Hollywood producers to get it made into a film anyway. So we never heard about it. We never found anything. Now 5 years goes along. I get a notification from someone who wishes to remain anonymous to say, you know what, I have a copy of that script. And I'm like, about every couple of weeks, I run across one of these instant messages where someone's got something.
Yeah.
Well, you're hesitant, of course. And I said, okay, sounds good. Send it over. And so I received it in the form of a PDF file, 126 pages. And it said Gray State script written by David Crowley in May of 2014. So I go through and read it. It looks legit to me. I'm not going to comment if I like it or not, or if it was well done or not, but it looked to me like a script, and it was the content of what David Crowley was producing. So I released it onto the Justice page and say, here it is. I'm not going to talk about it or summarize it. I just uploaded the file directly to our page. There's a section called Files. If you go to our Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group and become a member there, you can see all the files. I uploaded it there. People were looking at it. People were reading it. People were giving comments and pros and cons and, questionable things. And that was that. Now, a couple of weeks later, I get approached by the same anonymous person to say, here's another revision. Well, I'm like, oh, really? Seriously? Are we going to get these now every 2 weeks? I said, okay.
I'm not mad at it.
Sounds good. Send it over. It's in PDF format, 126 pages. It's simply called V6, version 6.
Right.
Now, this one doesn't have a name, doesn't have David Crowley's name. There's no title. The content is roughly the same as it was before. There's some things that were changed and altered, but I'm like, okay, I'll upload this as well to the same group, to the same section, and people can read it and draw their own conclusions. It seems to me like it was David Crowley's script. Was it in a finished version? Was it a preliminary version? What happened to the 5 versions in between, or the 4? What's the deal? Some people read it. I think actually Greg Fernandez Jr., who's on this call, and said, I think that sounds to be more like a preliminary script than the other one. It doesn't sound like a Norwegian version, but something else. Now here we are at the end of March. I haven't received anything back from anything else. All I know is that there's 2 versions of the script out there. We've all been waiting for this script. Now we have it, and it's odd. There's nothing really in it that's explosive. I don't know if that was the version he would have been pitching, either one of those versions, to the producers for $30 million. I
highly doubt it.
It was interesting nonetheless, but I liked all the banter that came about because it was out there now, and the members were able to at least put something together, get something to chew on.
Yeah.
The only fallback from releasing the first and the second script is that Greg and I now have been getting drawn a lot of flack. Things have been things have been laying low for a while as far as threats and accusations and things directed our way, and that kind of offensive speak and messages like that. Well, now the script is out there, and I've gotten not 1, but 2, but three or 4 strange things happening as far as instant messages, strange texts, strange emails. I wouldn't say threats, but people highly offended that this is out there. So I don't know what's in the script that's explosive, but there must be something there that someone doesn't like, because now it seems like we have stirred up a hornet's nest, if you will. That's all I've got. I don't know what else to say.
Can you identify any of the names from the messages you've been getting to anything that similar that you've gotten in the past, like anyone you've dealt with in the past? I know you've got previous messages.
It is. 2 of them were from people I have dealt with in the past, but I haven't heard from them in, I wouldn't say months, I would say years.
Right.
But now, out of the blue, I get nasty messages from 2 of those individuals. The other 2 situations were people I did not know, and I still don't know who they even are. Right. But the timing is important here. It's the timing, because that's the only thing that we've been releasing, other than Greg's book that came out at the end of last year. We haven't been getting hit with anything. Now the script is out there, and it seems to have rubbed someone the wrong way, some of these folks. And so I don't know why, but that's all I've got. I'm glad they're out there. I'm glad it's out there. It doesn't give me any more, I guess, comfort. I mean, I read it, but I think others in the group have done more deep dive into that script than what I do as far as their backgrounds.
What strikes to me strange hearing that as somebody who really, you know, as a fresh perspective, this doesn't really know anything about it, as a complete noob, is, you know, we see various films, TV series where we've got totalitarian governments take over, suppression of civil liberties, rights, etc., especially in sci-fi. Yeah. So for me, just coming from outside of this whole area, be thinking, well, this, you know, apart from the guess, is it just another potential film with similar messages to some of them we've seen. So it's, I'm not discrediting anybody's work, but you're getting you know, more or less messages that are kind of inferring stop what you're doing or stop going down this line, when, you know, we've seen things like this, as I said, mentioned in other forms of film and media. So that to me just comes across as quite strange already. And, you know, and I don't really know anything about this, just, you know.
Do you have anything else on what Dan said, Greg? Because there's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, sure. There is a lot to cover there. And when I read this script, I thought this is one of the greatest scripts that I've ever read, personally. And I've read a lot of scripts because I like writing scripts, and it's tough. It's really tough to write a good script. So when I read this, and I read the first one that Dan got, May, I think it has the date of May 12th. Yeah, May 12th, 2014. And I was hooked. I was really hooked. And so I really enjoyed that script. When I read version 6, it felt like a rough draft. And of course, I don't know, you know, and we don't know which one came first, and I can only speculate, but I do feel like version 6 came first. And I do think that the draft from May 12, 2014, I do think that draft is what got David this $30 million deal, because that's right around the time, I think it was maybe a week after that or something. So whatever he wrote in that one, I think that's the one that got his foot into the door. Now, we know around September of 2014, that became a TV series. So I don't know what the hesitation was, but looking at it more, I'm kind of feeling like the script is a prequel to the TV series, because if you read it, and I don't know if we want to spoil it or how deep you guys really want to go into it, but you know, it leaves the door open for a TV series. That's the way that I felt. Like, if you look at the last couple scenes, and I know they're very difficult because there's a lot of jumping around and stuff, but to me, it looks like that is setting up what the TV series will be, is the whole country at war, at civil, the whole country is involved in a civil war by the end of it. And what's crazy is the film starts that way too. So it's just like, you're kind of hoping things are going to get better, and nope. But there is hope.
You take a guess, they won't.
Right.
For sure.
And
yeah.
some of the other things that I liked about the script was his fighting scenes. I thought some of those fighting scenes, I could actually visualize it. And so I was looking forward to, you know, I obviously love martial arts movies, so I wanted more and more fighting scenes, but I could visualize those fighting scenes, and I think they would have been really, really good. The most interesting thing about this script is the fact that Danny Mason's character was taken out. The name for Danny Mason's character is John Wank. W-Y-N-C-K, something like Wank, whatever. John Wank, come on. We all, whatever. So, but that character is not in this script. That character is completely taken out. And I believe the main character's name is Daniel Walker. So it's changed. So, you know, one theory is that it was changed. Whatever it is,
we know that David and Danny were working on a, David was trying to get Danny Mason to sign off his rights, and David was telling him that he would still have rights to the character John Wank. Nothing is mentioned about this Daniel Walker, and this is in May of 2014. So it makes sense to me why the guys that David was talking about, the two Mikes, it makes sense now why they did not know who Danny Mason was. They had no idea that Danny Mason was ever even part of this whole project, because by May, it looks like by May of 2014, Danny Mason's out.
Yeah,
so
yeah, I would agree. Yeah, that is the way things look behind the scenes. I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning because Dan unpacked so much there. So because these are all like common misconceptions that people get with the Gray State feature film narrative that, the screenplay David wrote versus the concept trailer versus the Gray State mess that just tried to capitalize on the situation versus the Gray State, the rise. Because I'm gonna go. So the concept trailer drops first, and that's what they used to run the Indiegogo campaign that they were using for crowdfunding, which is how I got involved. They got $60,000 for that, and that was supposed to be used for resources to help write the script and get it ready to pitch it to the pitch it to a studio to pick up the feature film, which is what Dan was referring to earlier. In that time, David was working on the Gray State, the Rise documentary, which was supposed to cover the kind of background subject matter, which is the documentary of the topics that was the material Gray State, the feature film, was going to use. So it's like, that's why so many people confuse this with, like, I see a lot of people go on the group and they go, I saw Gray State. And it's like, no, you saw a Gray State. And then, or they go on YouTube and they go, where's the movie? I want to watch the movie. I'm like, yeah, I want to watch the movie too. You know what I mean? And as Dan says, it didn't really ever get to that point. They had, possibly early or late level screenplay that was, being used to pitch to Hollywood or wherever. I suppose now the big thing would have been, streaming services such as, Netflix having its own studio, Amazon Prime and the like, and all of them picking up stuff. But one thing I want to say about the Gray State, the Rise, is when we had this infighting that I told you guys about when I saw the comments. See, I'm more active on like Twitter than anything else, but a lot of those pages have their Facebook linked to their Twitter. So when Gray State, the Rise started posting slandering Danny August Mason, it was actually Sean Wright, I believe, is the one who had the admin rights to that page. And I guess he was doing, what was left of the Gray State, the Rise stuff. Now, after David's passing, this unfinished version of Gray State, the Rise leaks all over YouTube. It's like 3 hours long, and it has like these unfinished portions of it where it says like, insert something here, blah, blah, blah. And later on, that starts getting flagged and taken down. It gets removed, and then ultimately they remove the Gray State from it. It comes out. It's like 2 hours long. They chop a bunch of David's stuff out of it, and it's just called The Rise. They totally dropped the Gray State from it. And they also mostly removed Danny August Mason from the documentary, which, had a lot of shots of his material, the concept trailer material they used, as well as a bunch of, extra, extraneous footage that they were using for the Gray State channel at the time when they were doing the promotion campaign. So there's just a whole bunch of strange things there that are totally inconsistent as far as guys arguing with each other across Facebook, and then, chopping the documentary and kind of putting out this abomination that has like really bad sound mixing. So at that point, that's the trailer and the documentary. Then the Gray State documentary hits Netflix, which I suppose is where most people watch it. And it kind of has you guys segments in there. And, they kind of put you guys in as, they totally tried to just write you guys off. And it's like, it's hilarious. They tried to get you guys to say something that they really couldn't get you to say, you know what I mean? Which is like, you guys believe the government did it, right? And you guys were like, no. Like, we're looking into the case, you know what I mean? Just like, we just want answers, you know what I mean? Which is kind of funny. They're like, yeah, because there's people on the internet that believe stuff like these guys, you know what I mean? It's like, yet you go into the rest of the documentary, it really doesn't have any facts or, probably the weirdest part about it for me is like the whole pact pact theory, where you have these mentions of this pact theory, but there's just really not anything to back that up, that there's any evidence of it, like other than like, yeah, a couple people heard there was a pact. Okay, so and then it just goes straight on. So there was a pact. What? They just totally gloss over it. You know what I mean? Like there's absolutely no evidence. Like that's just super strange about it. So I mean, that pretty much gets us to here with the concept trailer, the Rise, the A Gray State, and then finally Dan, you know, gets a copy of this this feature film screenplay. So that's pretty much where we're at now, guys. You know, with all this stuff, and also, you know, now we have Dan's book. Greg's book, The Gray State, which I think, you know, has some really awesome material in it as well. Very very informative. So everybody, go check that out. I think that's one of the best kind of timeline followings of all the information in one place, aside from the updates of the video updates that Dan has done on his channel, which you've pretty much been doing those for years, Dan, with pretty much the big deep dive of all the way in on the info. So I'd say those are the two main places to find information on the case. But yeah, that's the difficulty with this case, is you're talking about like 5 projects with all these shady characters, and no one agrees with each other and no one gets along. But yeah, you know, I would say without a doubt, and after that split with Sean Wright and Danny August Mason moves out down to Austin, so he's out from where they were shooting all that stuff as well. So it's like, it almost seems like for sure that there was a split there. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing I want to bring up is when Danny came on the group drunk and he was supposed to debate you or whatever happened, Greg. Like, that's something I would have really have liked to see, because, you know, nobody from this Gray State crew, I mean, they did like what Mason did, that one podcast, and a couple people did things here or there, but nobody, you know, they did like a couple interviews after David, but again, no one ever answered any questions. And that's kind of another huge problem with it, is you have these people kind of trolling Greg and Dan online in their Facebook Messenger, but no one wants to come out front and face the fire. You know what I mean? So that's another huge problem I have with it. So yeah, I don't know. Definitely. I kind of rambled there, but I don't know if you guys have anything on that.
Yeah, I got a couple things. You brought up a good point. Part of the confusion, I think, with the name was the Netflix, or at the time, it was, I think, broadcast originally on A&E Indie Films. I think they named it A Gray State on purpose as part of this propaganda to cause additional chaos and confusion. They could have called it the David Crowley, murder nut job case. You know, they could have called it something else, but they chose to call it something very similar, and it was added that way on purpose as propaganda to cause more confusion. And so
I agree. I totally agree.
Good point.
I think what happened there. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I think what happened there was this. They found out about the concept trailer. Everyone found out that it made 60,000 plus, and I think it was like 65 in crowdfunding. They found out that the feature script was never leaked at the time, or that the project was never completed, albeit a feature narrative film or series. You know, that part doesn't matter. So there was this huge. They found out that the Gray State Facebook, didn't they have like 60,000 like subscribers or likes or followers, whatever? They have this huge following there. So they found out there was this huge following that crowdfunded a concept trailer into a lot of money, of a concept trailer that got 3 million views, like Dan was saying, but also that the feature film never came out. So there was this huge void of a fan base here. And, you know, that was like Dan said, a kind of promotional executive decision. This project never came out. Well, we can name our documentary A Gray State, and that fills the void right there. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a unfilled, you know.
Correct. And it was to cause confusion. And before that documentary came out, there was a big piece done in a feature piece in the New Yorker magazine that came out several months before. Alec Wilkinson did that article, and it was. Yep. I read through that, and I'm like, well, that was also pure propaganda. They were just pushing a narrative to get it out there. But once we found out, by the time that article went to press and was published and went out into that New Yorker magazine, it was about the same time that the A Gray State documentary was going out and making
Right.
the rounds on the Tribeca Film Festival, all these, the Melbourne, the Sydney, Australia Film Festival, the
Yep.
film festivals. They entered it in the UK, all over Europe, and all over the United States and Canada. And then that came out in November, the actual movie,
Right.
November of actually December, around Christmas Day of 2017. And once you see the documentary, it ties in so perfect to that article that was written.
Yeah.
It was what I call a companion piece of propaganda,
Right.
Propaganda piece A and propaganda piece B, that are meant to go together as a thing, as a operation to fool the public, is all that it was meant to do. And so now you start asking your questions: why was a New Yorker involved with writing propaganda, and why is a Eric Nelson in L.A., Hollywood, propped up to go and make a documentary with this narrative that all lines up together with David being a crazy person, which means someone in high places and with lots of money was able to steer this event or steer this propaganda. This is afterwards now. I'm not talking that there's people in high places that called out the killing or the government did the killing, but the blowback and the aftermath of this family's triple homicide. And it involves a 5-year-old girl and his 28-year-old wife who had nothing to do with anything. So this is, it takes away all the focus on what really happened, the horrible things that happened in that home, to blaming it on that David and his wife were strange and were just an odd couple, not doing well financially, dire straits, and they decided to kill the family. Well, we already know that's not true, but you've got to ask yourself, why was the propaganda introduced in the format of a highly visible subscription New Yorker magazine and a big movie called A Gray State with the guy who did the Grizzly Man and funded by Werner Herzog. This guy goes way back. So you got to ask, why were these people put in place to do this? And not only was it just a documentary that went out on A&E and then ended up on Netflix, but they entered this film into all of these award categories for the Oscars that year. Best documentary, best original, all of these things that they wanted to really pump this thing up big and push it out there. And that takes funding to do that as well. They entered all of these different categories to win. Nothing came of it, and it ended up being a backfire. But that was the intent, was to compete, is to get as many people of the common general public to believe this narrative, and at the same time shut down people like me and Greg and others who were honestly just looking into questions because as an attempt to discredit us. So that to me is very telling when you put out something like that, to do that. Now, I'd like to thank them at the same time, because most people who watch that documentary, who are critical thinkers and understand the big picture and how things really work, leave that movie when it ends thinking something's not right.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Something doesn't add up. The dots don't connect. It's kind of jumbled the way it's set up, and it doesn't really make sense. And we're seeing such a big influx on new members on our page, I think because of this coronavirus COVID-19 outbreak, and everyone's locked up at home, and we can't keep up with the new membership coming into the group and people watching this because they've got nothing else to do. So we thank them all for that.
Yeah. What's our numbers at, Dan? What are the numbers at right now?
Well, just today I looked that up. We crossed over the 3,000 membership here in the month of March, which is pretty big for. I manage 7 or 8 different pages on Facebook that have 200 or 300 people on some of these groups, but nothing as big as 3,000. But we did see a 6% increase in the last 2 months, and we added 272 new members in the last 60 days.
That's crazy.
And of those members, 1,800 of those 3,000 members actually show as active in the past 60 days as well. They're actually there reading, looking at things, watching, commenting, and responding and liking things. They're not just dormant members that don't take any action. They're very active in our group. I have found that 65% of our members are women, 35 are men. So it's really drawing in a lot of females into this case. They're really drawn into this, the true crime nature of it. And the age group between 25 and 54 years old is 78% of our membership is that group. Not a lot of young folks, not a lot of older folks, but right in the middle, the 25 to 54 is 78%. And we're getting countries by the demographic breakdown. Number one is United States, of course, but number two is the UK. Then we get Canada. Australia is number 4. Germany, Mexico, France, Italy, Pakistan, and India. These are the top 10 countries, but it goes down. There's over 100 countries listed that make up our 3,000 members. It's a wide array. It's a very diverse group of people. Now in the U.S., the top 10 cities, as far as our membership breakdown: Minneapolis, New York City is number 2,
Nice.
San Antonio is 3, Los Angeles, Houston. Number 6 is St. Paul, Minnesota. Number 7 comes in as cities, not even in the U.S., is Sydney, Australia. Is the 7th largest city of our membership. A lot of people down under are following this case down in Sydney. Then it goes to Chicago. Then number 9 is London. And then Philadelphia, Pennsylvania rounds out the top 10 for biggest cities. But the membership is just, it's phenomenal. And we have such good people as well. They're honest to goodness people looking for the truth. Many of them have contacted me directly saying, I've had a loved one commit suicide, or have had a loved one that was killed, or I've had a loved one that is in a situation like that, or has been discredited, or is a whistleblower. And so you get a lot of people that have empathy. I think it's the biggest thing of our memberships is they have the empathy background. And we're going after these people, which oddly enough, the men and the folks that are in the Gray State Project are comprised mainly of individuals with no empathy and no conscience. Yeah, I could probably go down that road as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I think what a lot of people what have probably picked up just from watching it, as you said, is you've got this case of a loving family, and it just doesn't seem to make any sense. As I said earlier, when we were talking before we went live, it feels like there's a whole part of this story missing. And you guys are simply just asking some questions, saying, look, what's happened. You're not saying, right, we think this person's done it, or anything like that. And it's just like you said, when people watch this documentary on Netflix, like I did, I think I had a migraine after watching it. I was just so confused. Stop. I still can't make sense of this. What has happened? And that's me coming from a totally new perspective. And you're totally right, Dan. Anyone watching that, if they can empathize and say, look, here's a very loving family, and it's very tragic what's happened. So what is these missing information that is out there that doesn't seem to back up those loving people that we saw on screen? So yeah, 100% agree.
The other thing, Greg, and you might get this as well, but the people that I talk to that communicate to me or are happy, enthusiastic about joining the group, is the number one comment is they always seem to say, you know what, I'm consumed by this case. I've gone just 6 hours of watching videos. I've just finished, 11 hours of watching YouTube videos on this case, and I can't get enough. I just can't stop. So what they do is they become almost obsessed with the case because it's so intriguing, and that's what I'm seeing a lot of is the new members, and they're coming in from all over, all cities, all countries. There's an interest, but right now I think because of the coronavirus and the various lockdowns of all these different countries, I think people are stumbling upon that as maybe a recommended movie to watch or something on Netflix. They may not know anything about it, and they're jumping on. I also see we're getting a lot of locals. I myself am in Minnesota, and we're getting a lot more people in the state, I think, and in the area that hadn't even known this case existed. I mean, this is a triple homicide that was horrendous back in 2015, and because of the lack of media coverage on the case, a lot of people just didn't hear about it, and we're getting those now.
These current numbers you're seeing, is this your fastest growing rate ever?
Other than starting off when we started the page was huge, and then once that the original police report came out, Greg, I think it was January of 2016. January of 2016, Apple Valley Police Department concluded their investigation. And there was some pieces done in the local media, articles, People magazine, and a lot of nationwide articles did a summary basically confirming the fact that David did this allegedly. We had a huge influx of new members at that time. And then I think once the documentary came out, that was the other time we hit a peak.
Yeah.
But nothing like this. This is it's tough to keep up with all the new members. It's exciting.
We got to get Greg back in here soon because he's been out for a little bit. But because Dan covered so much when he was talking before, I want to just go back to the publications and the hit piece of the kind of propaganda pieces that came out at the time. The other thing Dan pointed out were these kind of obviously fake film reviews that popped up on Rotten Tomatoes and all these other things that are like 100% ratings, like it's the best thing I've ever seen. Like it wasn't even out yet. 3 people had been at like 3 film festivals, like, and they kind of just started popping up instantly. I found that to be
Disney.
super fabricated response, and also the whole circus of the the whole circus of the A Gray State documentary. You know, it, as Dan was saying, it romanticizes their pact, and it becomes more about this, you know, kind of seemingly false domestic violence narrative, and how David was this tyrant, and it just creates a circus out of the whole story, and you start to forget that this is a real family, you know, like Greg was saying, and his, you know, that's the main focus of his book. You know, the project David was working on, it kind of glosses over that too. Like, not that, okay, you know, he had this big meeting with these Hollywood producers, but more like, oh, and David was working on this A Gray State screenplay, and it was about conspiracies, and yeah, he was looking into some dark stuff, so he snapped. But anyway, and then it, you know, again, it glosses over it and jumps back into this. What are we talking about? So I find it completely inconsistent and completely incoherent. But Greg, do you have anything on any of these recent points?
I think that's a great way to say it. That's exactly it. You know, it jumps around purposely because it knows it's just trying to hit beats, and it's trying to hit beats to touch people, to get them to not look any further. That is their whole point. Well, this guy's crazy. Oh man, you know, okay, well he's nuts. So of course he did it. Well, his script was going bad. The deal was dead. I don't know if they really cover that the deal was dead, but then they show,
I think they basically insinuate it, you know,
they basically do, and they show, you know, that the 2 Mikes, their reason why they passed on it, they try to just build all of those different things, but it's really what we don't see in that film is the most important thing. There is a reason why Kamel's family was taken out. They wanted all of their stuff taken out. They did not want to be part of this project. Yep. And that's a big deal, because I wonder if David's side, if there's people on David's side that also feel that same way too. So that was a big thing. But yeah, the whole pact theory, the whole pact thing, and they're still promoting that. People are still trying to convince people that there was a pact theory. It's crazy.
You know what? I want to bring up something unrelated, but at the same time similar. This whole, I'm familiar with another documentary that attempts to push a pact theory out of New England. There was this thing about the Gloucester 18 with these high school girls that were supposedly created a pregnancy pact for all of them to get pregnant, like young girls in high school or whatever. And there's like multiple documentaries and projects made about this. It's just this random article popped up, almost a similar situation as far as random articles popping up and then these weird documentaries blowing up about it. And it ends up being the same situation where a lot of it was just publicized, and there may have never been any pact at all. So there's something about, you know, when there's not much clear-cut material for them to just put their story out and stick to it. It's like the pact is like it's like almost like a scapegoat. You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, we don't have much, so it was a pact, and then they throw it out there, and you're supposed to go with, okay, well, you know, none of the evidence points directly to David, so let's go with the pact thing. You know, I feel like it's like the throw it out in the trash. It was a pact. Like, huh? Like, again, there's just nothing that sticks to it.
I'm still surprised they didn't stumble upon a big giant manifesto written by David Crowley or something. And it had a lot.
I'm sure it's coming.
That's the other one, right?
They always have a manifesto.
You still got revisions rolling in, so there's plenty of someone's working on it right now.
Redrafting.
Manifesto by David Crowley, version 7. You know,
I'm sure people tried. I'm sure they tried, but they tried a lot of different things. But it is really about how the common person watches that film. So Gaz, you didn't know that much about this project. You didn't know that much about David when you watched this movie?
Well, we actually did interview David back on our old audio stream.
I thought I recognized your
Gaz is my original co-host from our original audio show we used to do. We had a basically cross-genre, you know, him out of the punk scene and me out of the hip-hop scene, and we used to do films and other things that we were interested in. But Gaz was familiar with the concept trailer and what the project was to me, but I don't think he followed the actual case.
I reached out to David and Danny. We exchanged a couple of emails, and you know, we did the interview with David, and it was generally going over the pitch concept with the film and everything, and then a bit of a general chit chat. I think we maybe discussed his career in the military, and since then, no, I haven't followed it at all. I heard about, you know, the tragedy. Obviously, it was shocked because I was like, wow, that's a guy who's been on our show. And actually, we had another guest from the punk scene who committed suicide as totally different case and circumstances. You know, nothing suspicious around that one, but it certainly shocks you because you're like, hey, you know, we talked to this guy, so. What I can say,
we talked to David twice, Gaz. You set up a preliminary call where we all spoke to get to know each other. Then we did the real show. So
that's
Gaz set up both those.
And what's struck, like as I've mentioned a few times, when I watched that documentary on Netflix, when I've looked up the various sites, tried to read other reviews and articles, and you know, there's a lot of what we see now online of people just attacking each other. Like, would somebody just read this? Because to me, who doesn't know anything about it, this seems really funny and suspicious. Like I've mentioned, there's just more to it, and you know, you guys are just wanting to try and uncover what that mystery is.
That's right. Yeah,
absolutely. Going into what you were saying, Greg, about Sidra, I do want to get to the script because that was kind of be my main focus. But obviously, when you're dealing with a book, 5 different projects, Dan's 10 years of research, it's not quite easy to just pull up the Rolodex and rip from topic to topic.
Yeah, here we go.
You know, it's like JFK or any other big, you know what I mean? It's not just the easiest thing to cover in one call.
Just rolls up, doesn't it?
Dan has an entire channel for it. Greg has an entire channel for it. Another Gray Stage page. It's, you know, the best way to follow the cases is along with those resources. But going to the resource of Greg's book, when you spoke with Sidra, Greg, I believe that was over the phone or however you chronicled it in your book. And basically what she says of like, it's never the project is never getting done without the permission of Sidra's father. And I guess that's interesting because so does that mean he got a stake in the actual intellectual property? Because wasn't our understanding that if David copyrighted it, with him gone, we thought that the rights would go to Dan Crowley Sr.? Was that the way things went? Because I wasn't 100% sure on that.
I'll probably let Dan take that one. I think he probably knows more about.
Well, I think all of that. From the business standpoint, the script was owned by, I think it was Hothead Productions, or the movie, and so David Crowley owned that himself. 100% was Hothead Productions, and so that was his business. That was his movie. That was his script. Now we know Danny August Mason was a co-founder and co-creator of the whole thing, but I don't know if he had any a stake in that ownership at all. And so the script itself, once David died, murdered, you know, you got to go through the chain of the remaining heirs of who gets the rights to that. Now, and I would say that script was probably the biggest asset that David Crowley had. He lived in an average home and drove average cars and didn't have a wealth of other things. And so when people say you need proof for means, motive and opportunity to kill someone, there wasn't really that much for David except for that script. And so that was valued at roughly $30 million. And so this is how we get into the fact that if someone didn't want David around, they would have taken out David. But there's a reason, in my mind, my opinion, that his wife was taken out and his child, there only had one child, was little Rania, was 5-year-old girl. All of them had to be taken out for that script or that asset of $30 million potentially to land in either the family's lap of the Crowleys, which was David's parents who were divorced, which is his parents. His father was Dan Sr. and his mother was Kate, or it would land into the Alam family, who was Komel, David's wife. His parents were married, was Naila and Anjum were the parents. And so your question is, would it land into their lap or would it land into the Crowley lap? That's my question as well. It should go 50-50 to each. And I think the Crowley family assumed it was going to fall into their lap. And I think that's why the people that benefited from the killing, if you want to go that route, from a detective standpoint, who benefits from having these 3 people dead? It would be, in this case, Dan Crowley Sr., the father, Kate, the mother, and the kids, which is Dan Jr. and his sister Allison. Now, 7 months later, David Crowley's mother, Kate, who's divorced,
passes away,
dies strangely enough under strange circumstances. Her body is found dead outside of her house, also in Minnesota, in the same city as where the dad or the ex-husband was living, and her body was found out on the backyard patio, slumped over a table on table outside. So they came and looked for her. The boyfriend, the person she was dating, she wasn't returning any calls that night. Went and did a welfare check, called authorities, and they found her body there dead. Now, she was only 51 years old, healthy, and had 2 jobs, but maybe she just did die accidentally. To me, that raises too many red flags, because if Dan Jr., the brother, who David was not getting along with and had severed ties, they weren't speaking, had something to gain and possibly was involved in the killing or the commission of this crime, he may be involved. And so the dad is Dan Crowley Sr., who was quick to grab a hold of that script or take the company to the next level to buddy up with Danny August Mason and create this new company called Gray State Universe LLC.
Yeah,
which was put into creation in the month of May, along with the appropriate trademark and copyright information from a business standpoint. They were the 2 that wanted to take this script and run with it, not to get another $30 million to go to big budget Hollywood producers to make it, but maybe they were going to pitch it to some mid-size and make 15 million off it or something smaller.
Yeah, go to the streaming services or something instead of a theater release.
They took an active role on taking that next step, as were found by the evidence that we found going back to the Secretary of State, Minnesota. We found that the company was formed. We found that Danny August Mason did hire a lawyer to get it trademarked, to get the logo of the Gray State done, and incorporate some of the intellectual property for that. So we've got evidence to suggest that he was moving forward with this case. And so nothing was said about the Alams at all. And so I think that they, push comes to shove, should have 50% rights to that script or any asset that David had, because David was married to Komel, and in the state of Minnesota, you are now one unit. You're not 51-49 ownership, it's 50-50. So the next heirs or the next of kin would be 50-50 for that script should go to the Alam family and the Crowley family even, and then have a judge or something divvy it up from there. But it was at that point that the Crowleys never communicated to the Alams after that point. There was no communication. They started having issues with that script as far as who was going to take that business and run with it. Crowleys took it, basically assuming it was theirs, and started running with it, and then never returned any phone calls back to the Alam family. And so that's where we start putting the pieces together of what was going on here in the mindset of these individuals. Now, Danny August Mason, all he had to do was sign off on his legal rights that David recommended back in August of the year before the family was killed. He just wanted him to write him out, as he did in the script. Greg said in the May script of May 2014, had already written Danny August Mason out of the script.
Right.
And so when he's working with the producers and the executives in Hollywood, they already knew they were going to go with the different main actor. They didn't want to have Danny August Mason,
right.
which I think David didn't want him out there either. So he was done. His days were numbered being in the gray state. So there's your motive now once again. And he says, I need you to fill out this legal paperwork so you can't come back later and claim you have rights to this movie or the script. Danny August Mason refused to sign that legal document.
Yeah, he was stalling. He responded back, but he was stalling.
He was given the paperwork in August, reminded to sign it in September, reminded in October, reminded in November, and finally, mid-December, David Crowley says, I'm giving you a deadline of December 16th. You either need to shit or get off the pot on this thing. You need to do something. You need to take an action. I'm moving forward without you, or we got to come up with something. So you need an answer by the 16th. Well, 2 weeks later, the bodies were found. Well, around Christmas, they alleged that the bodies were killed. And so there never was an answer from Danny August Mason.
Right.
As far as signing off those rights. So I think in his mind, because he didn't sign off on the legal paperwork, he was still owed something, whether royalties, whether it's
right.
business percentage of the business or something.
Ownership, yeah, exactly. Equity.
He still thought that. So I think that leads back to your means, motive, and opportunity for this whole thing. Sean Wright was already out of the picture, David's other good friend, and he had switched his phone number. David did, and in fact didn't even give it to Sean Wright. And we see that from a Facebook post when David was going to release The Rise, that documentary, just himself was going to release it actually for free.
And that's when Sean Wright attempted to control The Rise.
You can't do that thing called The Rise. And that's got my tax stuff in it that could send me to prison, because he was facing charges that he later pled guilty to in the state of Minnesota for tax evasion.
Right.
And so he was facing a lot of things. And then in one of his posts, Sean Wright says, David, here's my phone number. You got to give me a call. Call me. Let's work this out. So David had already cut off ties from Sean. He was in the process of cutting off the ties from Danny August Mason. And then the bodies were found dead. And the police detectives' first inkling should be to go to these two individuals.
Yeah, I agree with that.
With these people as simply persons of interest. They have the most to gain. They were the ones that had issues with it. They were the ones had a falling out. They were the ones not pursuing any. They wouldn't have been part of any of this $30 million project.
Right.
And his own brother, who he had a falling out with in August, wasn't even speaking to him, David.
Right.
So those would be probably the three first people I would, as a detective, start interviewing. And they never did that.
For sure. And not only that, it gets better when they question Danny August Mason. Did you have any ownership in the project? He says no. And then he says he was just an actor. So it's, but we never heard that any other time except for when he spoke to the police. You know what I mean? To everyone else, it was like, I'm VP of the, thing. So,
yeah, Ross, that's a good point. For a lot of the newer members here that aren't familiar with that, Ross is right on the money. He was questioned by police to say, what was your stake? What was your connection to David Crowley and this script and or this movie? He said, I was nothing, merely an actor. I had no connection from a business standpoint in this film. So that's an outright lie right there to the detectives. But like you said, he packed up and moved to Austin, Texas shortly thereafter.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to get Greg in here once again. I just want to shout out a couple people. Shout out to Sophia. She's with us in the chat. And then also shout out to my man, Mike O'Day. He's a very talented Boston area actor. He does Irish crime films, and he was in The Equalizer with Denzel Washington. Mike has helped me with some of my own screenplay writing and things of that nature. Very talented writer. Mike was just wanted a breakdown of, kind of the last few things that we covered. So basically, Mike, Greg and Dan are in this documentary called A Gray State, which covers the murder of the death of David Crowley, I will say, the questionable death of David Crowley, which was supposed murder-suicide of his family. David did the Gray State concept trailer, which I think I sent you, Mike. It was on YouTube. It has 3 million views. It's a pre-apocalyptic, dystopian, totalitarian martial law kind of thing, rather similar to what's going on now. And David passes away several years ago when he was pitching this feature film narrative screenplay to a Hollywood production company. And basically, after that happens, there's some fighting with the former crew that he was working with before, infighting, and kind of possibly struggle to get the rights to his project, which is ultimately never made to this day. Recently, somebody emailed a copy revision of the possibly working title screenplay to Dan, who posted it in their Justice for David Crowley group. So that's that's kind of what's going on right now and what we're covering right now. Do you have anything else on any of this stuff, any of these points, Greg?
No, I would actually love to hear what Mike thinks of the script if and when he gets a chance to read it. But basically, yeah, you just have you have a guy who was he was accused of a double murder suicide, and we can't find any evidence that he's guilty. Yet we have all these people, including the investigators, that keep telling us that he is guilty. There's nothing to look at here. These aren't the George that we're looking for. To go home. Don't worry about it. Life is good. Why do you care? Why do you care about this case? And it's like, well, why don't you guys care? Why don't you care enough to investigate this as investigators? That's what they're getting paid for. They're not getting paid to come up with their own theories and then go with those theories within 24 hours. Within 4 to 24 hours, these investigators are telling us David Crowley is guilty. Family and friends and Gray State team members are telling us that David Crowley is guilty. And all we've ever asked for was evidence. I wrote a book, 200 pages. There's no evidence. There's no evidence that David Crowley is guilty, and that's based on thousands of pages of documents. Right.
Yeah. That's yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing right there, is like the whole thing of the Kurt Cobainish soaked in bleaches about the thing is showing up to the scene and like, well, there's a couple of bodies there and there's a gun by the body, but it's not by his gun hand. Looks like, you know, that's the whole thing. It's like, you know, when they wiped down the rifle on the soaked in bleach case and they, you know, and they walked in and like, well, it's just a guy with a body and a shotgun and there's some heroin neatly put away in his heroin box. Looks like a suicide to me. It was like, that's the whole thing that was so soaked in bleach just about this thing. And also, there's a bunch of other things I want to get to, but real quick, Dan, I want to totally commend you for the hiring of the private investigator to look into the case. I wish we would have gotten a lot more out of Kenneth Maines. I was really looking forward to those results and how he praised the AVPD for what a good job they did. I totally commend you for doing that. I really think it would have been good to go with someone that was, and I don't know how many private investigators exist that aren't former police, because I know it's probably like 60 or 70% of them that are former detectives, which I understand because it's a very similar skill set. But man, dude, he drank the Kool-Aid so hard on that report, man, that I couldn't do it, man. Like I was just like, man, missing even the Gray State guys, and we all know what we think of them. We're ripping on them for the freaking hole in the ceiling, you know what I mean? And just the many other inconsistencies, and him just going, you know, everything they did was perfectly 100% right. This is exactly how I would have did it. It's like he wouldn't criticize any, like, let's be honest, they made some mistakes, and you know, much similar to the Kurt Cobain case. The difference with that one is now you have former chiefs and people coming out now, like Dan was saying, and Soaked in Bleach saying, this was terrible. We would never do this, would never go like this again, you know, even if we were looking into it now. One thing that's semi-related I want to shout out is, I don't know if you guys have had a chance, I mentioned it to Greg online recently, to see the Who Killed Malcolm X docuseries on Netflix. They basically do a deep dive into the Malcolm X case. As a result of that, of the research in that docuseries, the case is now getting reopened. That's Malcolm X, assassinated in the 60s in Harlem. You know what I mean? So you know what I mean? That I still believe the Kurt Cobain case could get reopened with how that went, and especially, I mean, granted, Malcolm X is high profile, so yeah, whatever, you have that, and also there was like 6 other presidents and super famous guys that were kind of part of that whole series, but you know, it kind of goes to show you, dude, the thing about the Malcolm X case is this: 2 of the guys they locked up weren't even in the room. So, I mean, it shows you the lengths that if they want to pin something on you, trust me, it can make it happen. One of the dudes had a doctor's notice and I believe a leg or a knee injury. So he literally couldn't have walked in to see Malcolm speak that day. You know what I mean? So it's like, this guy did 20, I think. So, you know what I mean? Like it should really put into perspective for people. And granted, I know there was obviously a lot of racism in the policy of what was going on between the Nation of Islam and New York police and blah, blah, blah during that Malcolm X case. But man, if they'll pin 20 years on 2 guys who weren't even in the room, trust me, this David Crowley thing is, you know, it's a guy out in the woods of Minnesota. It's much more easier to make it appear how you want it to. So if you like Soaked in Bleach, I recommend everybody take that out. Check out that Malcolm X docuseries as well. Guys, I'm sorry, I got to grab a water. Gas, can you take it from here for a sec?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll certainly try. Aside from the private investigator that you hired, Dan, has anybody else at all actually looked into it from a total neutral perspective? Has there been anybody? I'm just curious.
Well, I think the best way to put that is no one looked into it comprehensively. There's been people that have looked into it from a professional standpoint of a certain angle of it, of the crime scene or the bodies or the rigor mortis that had sit in, or the scene, the bodies, the timing of things. You know, taking a chunk of the case and doing a deep dive into that. People have done that. But as far as looking at the big picture, getting into the Facebook posts that were deleted after David Crowley died on his very own wall, while that laptop was in police custody. Now, I'm not saying the police did it, but it's things like that. Who else had his username and password? You know, we ask questions like that, but what we get hit back with is the password list for David Crowley was on a piece of paper for the whole world to see on the crime scene photos. Well, the question you have to ask yourself is, who had, before the crime scene photos were available that came out a year later, who deleted the post on his wall 5 days later?
Right.
The general public didn't have access to these things, and so we hear things of, you know, David was writing a journal. He was journalizing a lot of this. A lot of the domestic disputes and domestic cases, involvement with his wife were in the journal. Well, we haven't seen the journal. There is no journal. There's no mention of a journal. But we do see that Dan Crowley Sr., the father, is the one that comes back later after the investigation's done and has a revelation that says, you know what, I got my son's laptop back, and I was really doing a deep dive, scouring through the files, and I found, you know, a journal, electronic journal that David wrote, and it kind of answers everything. We're like, okay, time out, big shooter. So the police had it, didn't find it, but yet you were stumbling through his, you know, files and just found a journal. And you know, the question is, what does, you know, police say to that? What do, you know? We asked the investigators, what came of that journal? And so Greg's got a good connection, a responsible connection to James Gummert, the lead detective. We're very respectful. We agree to disagree on a lot of stuff, but he comes out and says that there was nothing, there was no journal. So why is the father of David Crowley lying when he tells people that he found and discovered a journal that explains all of this stuff? So now we have to almost bring in, you know, the father into the persons of interest to question, but they were never interviewed, never questioned. In fact, police went to them to get information on what could have possibly happened. Police took these very characters that we're pointing fingers at to look into. Police took them under their wing to get answers for this case, and so they were essentially bamboozled by their own thing. And I think that's part of the reason police do not want to reopen or reinvestigate this case, because it's really going to expose that they were bamboozled along the way.
Right.
And also were part of a cover-up after the fact. But what we keep hearing, and I forgot already, Gaz, what your initial question was. I got sidetracked. But what we're getting what we get hit with is they still think that we're talking, Ross, these stories with Malcolm X. There's JFK, there's RFK murders, and there's other things like that obviously have already been proven. Martin Luther King Jr. death has already been proven in civil court in 1999 that the government was responsible for the death, not James Earl Ray. We already know this to be
family sued the government and they sided with them and won. So I assume they got money for that.
So as with Kurt Cobain, we already know the answer. Now, no one wants to touch this subject, but people look to us and say, "But why do you think the government did this? Why was David Crowley killed in a government assassination?" Greg and I look at each other and say, "I don't think we've ever said that. I myself don't believe the government was involved in the David Crowley killing at all."
Right. Yeah. I mean,
but there's elements of agencies involved in the cover-up, in the subsequent backlash and the blowback from all this. There's evidence that people were involved in helping to aid and assist in the cover-up of this. I personally think amateurs made the killing of the family, but you need to focus on the facts. Greg's book is all facts. The facts that I mentioned to Kenneth Maines when I hired him as a private investigator, and I made sure that he knew nothing about the case. I was poking and prodding him to what his thoughts were on the 5-year-old girl's arm that was missing, and Homel, the wife's hands that were both missing, and David Crowley's right hand that was missing, and the skulls that were allegedly gone or missing. Those are the facts. Those are the facts. But yet, when you read the police report, you see 15 minutes of investigators saying that we see no evidence of forced entry in the front door. Well, one of the main parts of this case is that the rear slider was left partially open and unlocked in January in Minnesota. Now, wouldn't that be your shocking news as a detective to focus on the rear slider? Who came in or out of an unlocked slider on the rear patio at ground level? You could walk right in and right out in January in Minnesota in the month of January. So those are the things that Greg and I are focusing on the evidence. Now, the only thing that I could say to new folks out there, I know we see that we've got Mike O'Day in the chat room, and he'd be interested in reading this script and looking at this from a documentary perspective. But I would ask someone like him, someone brand new, to say, do you know that the bullet that killed David didn't even have blood on it? That's the thing that discredits the whole case. We aren't conspiracy theorists alleging that David didn't do this. We already know that David didn't do it. The evidence already points to the fact that the bullet was planted. There's no bullet in that house that has David's blood. He allegedly shot himself in the head with a .40 caliber weapon with a hollow point, no less. And
the thing about the hollow point is this. When I was reading Greg's book, The Mushroomed Bullet, I need to figure out if hollow points mushroom, because the thing I could see a standard round mushrooming, but hollow points have those 4 or 5 fragments that break off. And
they I don't know if they corkscrew, but they mushroom out, and they collect the brain, the blood, the tissue, the skin along the way, going through someone's head. So you would have skull fragments on that bullet fragment. You would have brain matter, blood, tissue, a whole assortment of things that they found. He shot himself upwards. The bullet went through the ceiling, allegedly, landed in the attic. Police found it, took it to the lab, and says that this is the bullet that killed David, but there's not a speck of blood on it after testing. Now, DNA came back that there was touch DNA on that bullet. David's DNA was on that bullet from a lab perspective. Not blood, but as DNA from touch, transfer, skin cells, something.
Yeah, I mean, you could have touch DNA on an unfired round that you just took and loaded in a magazine, or just touched and didn't do anything with. You know what I mean?
Well, David would have been the one loading those magazines and cartridges and the weapon itself. That gun was his. The cartridge was his. His touch DNA would be on all those bullets, perhaps. But the point of the matter is, there's not a single drop of blood on that bullet that was found in the attic. And much like Kurt Cobain, the weapon, no fingerprints on the handgun.
Yeah, no, and the handprint as well. Dan, can you break down this possibly forged signature check that we have when there's a, what was it, a $60,000 check that appeared to be Dan Sr. was possibly out of the country? I'd like you to mention that one because I feel like that's a fact that gets glossed over.
Yeah, that's another big factor in the case from an evidence, from a fact-based research on a case like this. David Crowley's father, this is Dan Sr. now, who allegedly found the laptop with the journal in it and all this other shenanigans, traveled extensively for his job, and the police report said that he was unavailable in the month of October of 2014. This is when a lot of this stuff was going on. The deaths were allegedly December, but the October, November, September timeframe, a lot of shenanigans were going on that actually point to premeditation. And so he was gone and wasn't in the country. In fact, Dan Crowley Sr. told investigators he was out of the country the entire month of October. He was in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we find when the BCA lab analysis and the investigative work that comes back from the Minnesota BCA, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the results come back at the form of a FOIA request. And one of the files is the banking file, the banking records. And it's showing David's bank statements, checking accounts, nonchalant things like that. But what we see is a $50,000 cash withdrawal at a bank, Wells Fargo, a Wells Fargo bank, $50,000 cash withdrawal on October 18th of 2014, taken out at a Minnesota branch location by Dan Crowley Sr. Now we got a couple issues with that. $50,000. This wasn't an instant cash transaction at a terminal. This had to be done at a branch bank location in front of a teller that you need to show ID with.
Right.
And so what we looked up with, because of Dan Crowley Sr.'s testimony to police, in his own words, that said he was out of the country, this withdrawal was made at a bank in Minnesota in the month of October that he said he wasn't there. So we have to assume that it wasn't Dan Crowley who did it. The question then is, who did make this withdrawal? So we went back through the records, financial records and other records, and was able to get a sample signature of Dan Crowley Sr., and then went and got sample signatures of Dan Crowley Jr. This is David's older brother. The account was in his name, so number one thing we're going to do is assume that maybe it was the son who did it. And so we got signature examples, and it looked very similar to someone, looked like the brother, looks like Dan Crowley Jr. did the signature. Now this bank account was a trust account for the Crowley children. David, his older brother Dan, and his sister Allison. It was a trust account. So when the old man dies, Dan Crowley, it was a paid upon death bank account, a trust fund for the kids. Now, a paid upon is that only money comes out of there when the person who owns it dies. So it's in Dan Crowley Sr.'s name. He didn't die. As far as we know, he's still alive. So nothing should have been coming out of that account to the kids.
Right.
Dan Sr. himself can do all the withdrawals and deposits he wants. That's his account. So what we think, the speculation, is that Dan Crowley Jr. went in with his ID and said, I'd like to withdraw some money from this account, and here's my identification showing I am who I am. Their middle initials were different, but the first and last name are the same. Signature looked to be roughly the same. Looked like the son's. So the question is, why was a $50,000 withdrawal done at all? Dan Jr. was at the time running a small business as a personal trainer or something. He wasn't making hardly any money. So there's an opportunity there that if he wanted to, that he had possibly the need for the money. Who knows? Some speculate that maybe the money was taken out to pay a hitman for the killings. But remember, this is October now. So that means it's premeditation that he wanted to hire a hitman to kill his very own brother, his flesh and blood, that's kind of a stretch for some people to believe, but it's on the table nonetheless. Now, we don't hear anything back from the father who wanted to argue or fight this to say, hey, that wasn't me, or confirming the fact that, yes, I was home and I did make that $50,000 withdrawal. Now, the old man, Crowley, the senior, was known by locals in his hometown as a millionaire. He had cash, and that account was fluctuating between $200,000 and $300,000 at any given time. That fund account for the kids, I think it even topped out at $500,000 at one time. But he was using that as a savings account for the kids one day. So he wouldn't have needed $50,000 in cash, probably ever. I don't know why he'd ever need that. And so we did have speculation that maybe there was a withdrawal and then someone made a deposit the next day or something. So we looked into that too. There were no deposits in the subsequent days or weeks of $50,000, putting that money back in if they needed it in a crunch, maybe to bail out somebody from jail, and then you go and you put it back in. There was no deposit back in, so the money came out. So there we've got a problem. $50,000 withdraw, unrelated. This is unrelated to the Crowley murder case. We've got a problem. Normal detectives and investigators looking into the case would already be contacting the bank by saying, no, it looks like we've got a potential fraud issue here. The old man is out of the country. Who's withdrawing the money and why, what happened to it? Nothing was looked into, nothing was researched, and nothing was followed up on by the Apple Valley Police Department by looking at that. Now, if you look at the date on that takeout slip and the person filling it out, the bank teller who was filling out the form, there was a date, it was crossed off, and the new date was written, and then the person had another cross off, and the information was written. It looks, by an amateur, someone looking at it for the first time like myself, that the bank teller was distracted when she was filling out this information. She was distracted, wasn't paying attention. And so Dan Jr., the brother, who we think took the money out, is known as a smooth-talking con artist to begin with. Well, I could easily see him conning the young female bank teller while getting this done, talking about something off to the side, and her getting distracted that she's got to cross off and put the correct date and fill out the account number was wrong. She had to fill it out again. So this is speculation on our part. This isn't fact.
Right.
But nonetheless, it does appear that that bank teller was distracted by something for some reason. And if he shows an ID that the name matches up, she would have given it to him. I don't think she would have looked at the middle initial that it was different. But the question that I have after all this is, why did Dan Crowley Jr. make an attempt to make a Dan Crowley Sr. signature on a bank file? It was a poorly done forgery is what it was.
Right, that's what I was getting to.
Dan Sr., but why didn't Dan Jr., if it was actually him, or if he didn't want to cause any suspicion, sign his own name? But he made it look like the handwriting style of the father to get the money. Now, was that part of a payment, a hitman or an assassin or two to be paid? That would fall in line with killing a family of three if you look at the $10,000 to $15,000 a head for a murder in a typical case like that. Possibly. I don't know. I'm not well versed in that type of stuff, but it falls in line. Let's leave it at that. Now, Dan Jr. is left-handed. So now this all ties back together. We got a bank issue, which I still think should be open to this day as a bank fraud situation. But we got blood handwriting on the wall that says Allah Akbar on the Crowley family home, written in blood, which some of the letters looks like it came from a person writing with a left hand. And now I'm not saying anything. I'm not leading any speculation, but if Dan Crowley Jr. had something to do with the money or the hiring or to get the script into his lap, did he or possibly could he have been at the scene? Maybe not did the killing, but wrote the impact on the wall with the blood. That's conjecture right now. But some letters were with the left hand. David Crowley was right-handed. The words in all uppercase, Allahu Akbar, was written on the wall in the living room. So we already got more and more things that don't make sense. David was right-handed. The gun was found to his left hand, but there's someone left-handed writing on the blood on the wall. So we got a whole Florida scenario. So the conclusion to this to my whole rambling here is this. If Dan Sr. comes back from Germany and now is looking into the investigation of his one son that's already dead, goes through some paperwork, bank financial statements to find out something his other son may or may not have done, would he be likely to call authorities and expose the other son to say, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
Now, he's going to be put away for a long time if he does that. Now you're dealing with the position of a father. Are you going to see both of your kids now gone, or would you already have one son that's gone? Do you save the other one and say, let's brush it under the table, and you know what? Let's go along with this conspiracy that David did it. And that's what we're getting the consensus of the members of the group is that, well, Dan Crowley Sr. may not have had anything to do with it because he's more than likely involved or complicit in the cover-up and the possible getting rid of the mother in the case, who was the only person, according to law enforcement, that didn't necessarily buy this whole suicide scenario was Kate Crowley.
Right. At what point are you going to implicate yourself?
Winds up dead 7 months later. And so he may be implicated with that death. He may be implicated with the covering up of the fraud charges at the bank that he didn't want to expose because that's going to send his other son to prison. More than likely, he is involved with the cover-up of some way, shape, or form. As far as him finding this manifesto or this journal on the laptop, this is the same guy we're talking about. Now, in the documentary, people are reading that the family members are talking about their interactions with David. Dan Sr. is the one on the documentary that's actually reading from a script by saying, you know, David did this and David did this, and too bad David killed his family and stuff. Here's the final journal entry on December 25th, Christmas Day. I'm going to kill my family today. You know, he's the only one on that documentary that really looks like he's reading something, that he's not being authentic. He's acting. And so that's what I think the general consensus of our justice page of the members is that he may be not involved with the killings, but he's obviously involved with something else because none of his behavior makes any sense.
Since you mentioned Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, but you uncovered that Dan Jr. receives another payment once again after the passing of his mother. Is that correct?
What I did with her case,
inheritance.
It was not the inheritance per se, but if you check the legal documents at the courthouse after his mother died, he was the first one asking to open up that death benefit scenario to do the estate. It was he was not the claimant, not the defendant. So he was the one who first came in and ensured that the county, in that county, that they started proceeding with the death benefits for the estate of his mother. And he was holding the garage sale of the house and the property and her belongings. Now, David's gone. The sister lives in another state. Odds are that he would have been holding the garage sale anyway, in charge of that. Or maybe he's the one going to the courthouse to open the estate. But nonetheless, we have it in writing that he's the one who opened the estate planning. The estate for his dead mother was him, Dan Jr.
And did you get an amount on that with David gone? Do we know how much? Okay.
So she wouldn't have been worth a lot or anything large like that. So it wouldn't have been a motive. Her death, the motive for her death would have been her exposing things in the family. Maybe she would have gotten in the way, could have been potentially a roadblock for this bank fraud situation that the dad was covering up for the son.
Right.
That would have, if that hit the news and made a big story, she could be certainly one to step up. She wasn't afraid to voice her concerns. Let's put it that way. So even in the police investigation, she said, "I don't believe that my son did this, unless," she said, "unless it was in the form of a pact or some sort of agreement." So already that scenario was in play when they went to the investigator. Someone planted that whole pact theory to the family. And I don't know who that is.
Absolutely.
It was planted.
Yeah, there's a few people that give kind of quotes, or I guess information, if you want to call it information, on the pact theory. Let's head back to the gray stage, and because I want to get into some more of Greg's book. Dan, you did the foreword for the book. Greg asked you to do that. So is there anything you guys, anything extra informationally that you want people to know about your book, Greg?
Well, I know Dan had mentioned that he spoke with several people, but Dan Hinnon also spoke with Kamel's father and Kamel's sister.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was, I put some of that into my book, but Dan, after speaking with them, do you think that they would have been open to looking deeper into this, similar to how David's mom was?
Well, you're right. David's mom knew something was goofy. His father signed up for the deal right away, and went along lock, stock, and barrel with what the investigator said. All the friends went along with it. Remember, David's friends were all conspiracy theorists. They were alternative media that would have looked at this case like, what happened? How can this even be? And
right.
Connected to Alex Jones, who would have been top news story every day of his show. Would have been the Crowley case.
Right.
He was silent.
Right.
So the people that stood out were Kate, the mother, who's now 6 feet under, and the Alam family. Mr. Alam, when I spoke with him, said that he was busy, as he was, dealing with his wife, Nyla Alam, had a case of cancer, ovarian cancer that she was dealing with, and she was in hospice care when all this went down.
Yes, a terminal illness. Yeah.
She had a terminal illness. He did not have the time, energy, or the resources to follow up on this. But he told me on our phone call, if I had time and money, I would want to look into this to find out what really happened, because this doesn't make sense.
Right.
That's what he himself said. Now, we don't hear anything more from him. He says later that he's open to doing the documentary, which he did. But like Greg said earlier in the podcast here, when the final version came out of that documentary, Anjum Alam, who I still think is a good guy in all this, says, I'm done. This is not how you presented this documentary to be. I don't want any part of it. And he goes, you're taking my daughter out as well. They had interviewed the daughter, Sidra, for a group. They says, you're removing everything out that has to do with any of us if you want to release this film. And so they did. They took it out. They put in some B-roll footage of other interviews, and they published the movie. But if you notice, like Greg Fernandez said, what's in the documentary is important, but also what's not in the documentary.
Right.
Someone watching, for instance, Gaz, when you watched it, did that pique your interest at all by saying, why isn't Komel's parents in this documentary? Everything was the crowd.
Exactly.
It just felt like there was another missing piece, and as somebody going in there with a completely neutral perspective, you would want to hear that other opinion, that other viewpoint, and that wasn't there. So yeah, totally.
So they were they were involved and wanted to do it. They were in, but I think and the other thing that the sister said was, she said, I'll be in this film. And the dad says he'll be in it, but the dad made sure that he said, when you film it, I want to have my daughter with me at all times. I don't want to have her be interviewed solo, because he knew potentially there's that option of being manipulation or led down with some leading questions and things like that. He says she's going to do it, but she's going to do it with me. So all the parts that they interviewed them they went to a local hotel in Dallas and filmed the parts in a hotel room, but both were together. But when they got the final review to say, how does it look, the final version before it went public, they says no. Now, the interesting thing is, Greg, with the final version, you and I were in the movie and never even heard that a final version came out, or a preliminary, or to ask what our thoughts were on it.
Right.
They didn't want anything by us. We just found out later that it was done and it got out there. They didn't send us a link to say, hey, guys, we're going to go to Tribeca Film Festival. Forward some people, send some links out on social media and help us promote it. Our role was done. Our role was to be thrown under the bus. We both interviewed for 2 hours, and what was made in the movie was 2 30-second clips.
Yeah. What is the point of having someone in and then not even telling them when it's gonna, like you said, if you're planning to go to the Oscars and go all the way to the top, you would want every single person involved to promote as much as possible.
Well, yeah, you want to promote what you've been involved with, don't you?
Yeah.
We didn't even know until the movie came out. Someone on the Justice page said, "Hey, you guys know that they're showing the film at the Tribeca Film Festival." We're like, which
ridiculous.
one? The one we're in? They said, "Yes, you're in it."
Didn't they have Greg swatting a fly or something? I mean, with all like there's
a flyer on his head, and he swatted it during the interview. That's what they put in the movie. That's
right.
What it's like the Twilight Zone with all the great research that Dan has done, and and Greg as well, and like as far as asking you guys intellectual questions to get an informed answer, which is what a documentary would be. One would think, you know what I mean? Since you brought up Komel's mother and the terminal illness, to make things weirder, to show people how far the rabbit hole goes with this weird stuff, is this point when this GoFundMe pops up to collect money on the Facebook, and is that not Dan Jr. again, who's the beneficiary of that? And they collect a bunch of money, then it gets shut down right away. I have to assume that was Anjum who wasn't with it, because random people collecting money on a GoFundMe and under the auspices of a terminal illness, no less, is like seems absolutely despicable, Well,
that is one of the things, Ross. Glad you brought it up. We don't touch on that enough, but when the page first got started, we really focused on that GoFundMe campaign. The campaign was set up after David, Komel, and Rania were killed in this horrendous event. That it was first announced, I think, on the page, is Dan Crowley wrote it or Danny August Mason wrote it, and says, "We found out today that our friend passed away." We're like, well, that's odd, they were brutally murdered. So then they die. Anjum Alam is dealing with his wife down in Waco, Texas, in a hospice care because of her ovarian cancer, and they're having a tough time paying bills. What comes up on the Gray State Facebook page group, not ours, but the group, says we're having a GoFundMe to raise $6 million.
That's what it was.
To raise money for medical issues for Nyla. The fund name was Medical Fund for the Crowley /Alam Medical Fund.
Mm-hmm.
So Greg and I look at each other like, why would Crowley's name be on the medical fund? That's odd.
Right.
The very next day, I log in, put $20 to the donation. No, 15. I donate $15 to this fund. I get automatic reply back, thanks for the donation, signed by Dan Crowley Jr.
Boom.
I get my screenshot. So why is Dan Crowley Jr. involved with this at all? He doesn't even know the woman. Doesn't even live in Texas. And may have met her once or twice. But when you go to GoFundMe, you go to create a campaign, it forces you to put in a goal amount. Mm-hmm. Now, Greg and I have looked into this. Other cancer, people dying of cancer, people going in for treatment, unexpected child cancer, they're going to raise $100,000, $200,000. You don't see $1 million out there. I've never seen $1 million, much less $6 million.
Right.
And so I go to Sidra and I said, why is Dan Crowley Jr. involved in a GoFundMe? Why is he working on this? And she brought it up to her dad, Anjum, and he says, "You're shutting this thing down. I didn't even know about it. I knew nothing about this. No one asked me.
See,
where's this money even going?"
Right.
So he had him shut it down. I get the money. I get the receipt. Next thing you know, the fund had raised $8,000. It was a week later, I think. The fund was shut down. We don't know to this day where the $8,000 went to. But why was Dan Crowley Jr.'s hands in the cookie jar once again?
So did your payment get kicked back to you?
It went through.
And like you said about the head of the cookie jar, everything with this guy just seems like a complete lie. This is just
you're dealing with
complete lack of empathy, and every time it's like it's like a trip to the bank. It's the fake GoFundMe. It seems to be money motivated, and you know what I'm saying? That's just
David. I think what David found out in the last months of his life, that his inner circle, including his own brother, he was infested and infiltrated by the snakes in his own group.
Right.
So he started to try to distance himself from some of these people, including his own father, that he turned down a couple times from babysitting his own daughter. He knew something was up, and he goes, I'm trying to distance. But the narrative, and Greg can back me up on this, the narrative we see in the movie is that David was isolating himself because he was in depression. He was financially in dire straits. He didn't know what to do after the movie makers says, no thanks, we don't want to have your filthy script, you're done. They used that and turned it against David, that he was isolating himself and was in a deep depression that ultimately took his life. That's how they spun it.
Yeah, not knowing that, you know, he could have had, you know, completely legitimate and good reasons for every decision he made. Let's get back into the book, because I've been reading this the past few days, The Gray Stage, and Greg does a really excellent deep dive into the case and lays out the facts, as Dan said earlier, in quite a good timeline. I mean, you pretty much cover everything in there, Greg, so it's kind of hard to break down any one thing. But one thing that's interesting to me, and I come from a bit of a background of researching this myself, is this chapter I finished recently on this possible paranormal activity that Sidra has when staying over with Ronnie. I just want to get your thoughts on what could have happened here and how you presented that chapter with this possible paranormal activity in the house.
I think there was something there, you know. And then after watching A Gray State and watching what they did put into that film, with Kamel talking about how she heard something, she felt a presence. I do believe that there is a paranormal aspect to this case, and that is something that you're never going to be able to really prove. So right. I get why people don't spend a lot of time on it. You know, it's a big hook, because it's one of the biggest ways that they can discount everything, that all of the research, everything that we've done. Sure. Once they hear that, they're like, oh, okay, these guys are really crazy. But I think what she said was truthful, and I don't have any reason to doubt it. And I think what made it into A Gray State pretty much confirmed what Kamel's sister said. It's really weird the way that it's in that film and how they don't really touch on it. They're just, again, they're just hitting beats. It's just beats to just stir up thoughts from different people. People that have had those type of things happen are going to just gravitate towards that. People that think that that is complete BS are just going to not even go down that road. They're going to turn the whole film off and never look at this case. So absolutely. You know, that's the only thing that I can say is I do believe that stuff can be real. I know one of the biggest theories, one of the biggest anti-theories to the ghost theory, to a paranormal thing, is that they were TIs, that they were a targeted people. Mm-hmm. And that's why, you know, they weren't really seeing anything, they weren't really hearing anything. Somebody was putting that into their brain, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know anything about that. You know, all that I can say is this is what she said. This is what Sidra said. She said that she saw a presence there. This is not when the other thing, the bigger thing is, this is not when they lived at 1051 Ramsdale Drive. This is, I think this was in 2013 or 2012. So this is, you know, prior to all of that happening. But
okay, so this is a different house than where the deaths take. Okay, see, I did not pick that up when I was reading that chapter. Okay, I'm glad you cleared that up for me.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just like it's one of those things that I didn't want to focus too much on. But at the same time, I felt that it was necessary because that's what she's told me. And
right. Well, you know what? That's information that you uncovered, and I still appreciate it. I appreciate you for putting that in there, because you could have easily left it out. You could have easily glossed over it and took the A Gray State route. Like, well, this is what she told me, but I don't believe in anything outside of the physicality in front of me. So, you know, just gloss over it type thing. Go ahead, guys.
I was going to say, well, it's approaching it with an open mind, and you want to look at all theories to try and ascertain the answer. That's what that says to me.
I think we lost Dan, but luckily we got a lot of information. Oh, I think we got him back.
He's back.
Boom.
Yeah,
back then.
That was the ghost that killed him.
Right when we covered that part.
Been totally rewrote as a Legion, but I won't go into my recent rants.
The way this show has to go, it has to go that way, right?
Yeah. So, just before I cut out there, Ross, you brought up a good point, and maybe that's another good point for a lot of the new members. David and Kamel lived in an apartment when they first got married and moved to Minnesota. They were in Dallas or Waco or Texas. She went to Baylor University. Another strange thing, it's a Baptist Christian university, and she's Muslim.
Right.
So they moved to Minnesota. They live in an apartment, have the baby. Then they just moved the prior December. They were in that house 12 months, only 1 year in Apple Valley in that actual house. And in fact, there's emails that have also been leaked a couple of years ago that show them working with a real estate agent in California to move to LA. And so they were interested. Not only was the script ready to go, and he was signing off on the deals of the movie web-based series. They were signing off on the options and things like that. They were looking at real estate homes in California to move because he was going to be closer to the film and closer to the whole thing. So they were very happy, looking forward to the future, and did not have money problems at all. Sorry, but that's a good point. They were just in that house 12 months and all this happened.
Sure. I mean, one of the things that, it's just super frustrating about this to me is granted, Gaz and I had limited contact with David. It's like, I would have loved to reach out to him and consult to him if he was in this supposed state of isolation, but we've only spoken to someone a few times in business, it's kind of hard to open up that kind of emotional channel. And the other thing about the whole dire straits financially thing is the check from Dan Crowley Sr. sitting outside on the front steps, while the family is essentially dead inside the house, is the most frustrating part in the world to me, because it's like, if it really was a financial thing and there's this check outside on the front door that no one checked, it's like little things like that drive me insane. Obviously, you can't go back in time and change the circumstances, but it's just like, I guess it's another part that doesn't really add up for me. What we were talking about when you just dipped out there for a second, Dan, was the paranormal activity kind of chapter that, or at least mentioned that Greg has in his book, and also how they present that in the Kamel is hearing voices, she's cracking, she's going down this downward spiral with David. We can't trust her, she's in the pact, she's compromised, right? But then Sidra, who we have assuming nothing but genuine information from, also has the same report as well. So that's kind of conflicting in my opinion with what you're showed in the A gray state.
One point I want to bring up on that, Greg. We did, or for Ross and Gaz as well, is that the paranormal stuff was, I believe, legit in that previous house, and there may have been something paranormal in the current house. But to reiterate, it had nothing to do with the murder of the three.
For sure.
Much like saying David was drinking absinthe or using mushrooms, we think there's evidence to support those things as being factual or true, but it doesn't relate to the deaths of these three people. So we have to discount it and focus on just the facts.
Absolutely.
Were they a happily married couple? It sounds like all looks of it was. Did they have some arguments or discrepancies? More likely it did, but we can't focus on that because that had nothing to do with the killing. There may have been paranormal activity. There may have been strange things going on, but someone still shot David, and it wasn't him, wasn't himself. So we've got an issue there. So those things are true. The other part of the documentary that Eric Nelson did with A Gray State was he inserted a lot of the video footage that David took. David was filming all the time, making audio recordings all the time. He was a producer, a filmmaker. He was recording his child in the backyard playing. He was recording everything.
Right.
So they had access to all these gigabytes of data, and that's when they started cherry picking the items to use in the film that cast David in a poor light. Now, the video footage is true. It's not a hoax. That's actual video footage that was used. Are they using it in a way to construe something and lead the viewer down a wrong path? Yes, but it's not a hoax. It's not made up. It's not footage that's not photoshopped.
Yeah, created.
It is footage. There's footage of David doing some strange things. There's footage of Comel doing some very strange things. There's footage of Rania having a tantrum in the basement. Those are actual footage. But the way they presented it is to shed bad light on the family and to discredit David, discredit Comel, and discredit Rania. The Alam family, and this is my last thing. I gotta jump off here in a few minutes. The Alam family was more disgusted. Remember this, Greg? When we found out when the movie came out, after they took their pieces out of Anjum and Sidra, the sister and the father of Alam, of the Alam family, they did. Eric Nelson and his staff obliged and took those pieces out. What they put in, or the reason they got angry, I think, Greg, was the hallucination scene that they put in on purpose to discredit Comel, who had nothing to do with this whole murder case.
Right.
That's the thing that when Anjum saw that and Sidra, they're like, no, you're really trying to put a spin on this whole documentary, and we want out. So they inserted that, not only to discredit David, they went so far as to discredit his wife, who's another innocent victim in this case that they threw under the bus. That to me is sickening.
Yeah, I totally agree. Do you want to shout out any of the recent series of cases you're following, Dan, and just where people can find you and to join the Justice Group?
They can join the Justice Group there. I'm under DM Hennon on Twitter and YouTube channel under Dan Hennon. There's also a Justice page for, I'm following the Jennifer Janes author, The Strange Death in November. From her, she's the Amazon bestseller author. Her body was found. She was writing some books on the anti-vaccination world, anti-vax, and young, healthy, 2 boys that she loved, 2 twins, and allegedly shot herself one day. So that is strange. Greg and I have both followed the Philip Marshall case in Calaveras County, California. We've got a Justice page for that. And most recently, I've been covering the DHS whistleblower Philip Haney's strange death that took place in Plymouth, California last month, where they said he allegedly shot himself. He had a book coming out. He was engaged to be married and was blowing the whistle on some things. And the official narrative that he pulled over onto a wayside rest, got himself out of the car, shot himself, and they ruled it a suicide. And so that's another case that obviously isn't the case. He was blowing the whistle on some things that took place in the Obama White House years ago.
Right.
But religious man, a very faithful guy, and Christian, and they said he just killed himself. So those are some of the cases that I've been following, but you could reach me there. But Greg's book, I just want to say that there's 16 chapters in Greg's book. Each chapter of this book goes into a deep dive on a particular topic, and it's backed up and sourced by the facts. Who made the quote, who sourced it, who said it, who stated it, and where it came from. Nothing in this book is from a Greg Fernandez as far as an opinion or a slant until the very end. He talks about some of the situations in the case. But these 16 chapters are fact-based. Not only fact-based, there's a source list at the back of the book that provides the link to every single thing that he's talking about. Many of this is right from the law enforcement's mouths themselves or the detectives. Quotes.
Direct interviews.
Quotes from the police chief. Quotes from the lead investigator. Actual quotes that we've caught them so many times in, I don't want to go as far as to say lies, Greg, but caught them in statements that are, I'll just leave it at this, contradictory statements.
Yeah,
family,
inconsistencies.
and law enforcement are very contradictory. And so Greg does a good job pulling all this stuff together in his book. I think it's the best book that's out there on this case at all.
Good.
There's just an analogy there where he's saying about referring to their answers, for want of a better word. Dan, it reminds me of an episode of UFO Hunters years ago where they were interviewing. He was a very senior ranking general, and they asked him outright. He's not going to confirm anything, and he was kind of smiling, like his eyes were saying something else, smiling like I can neither confirm nor deny. but everything his eyes revealed, yes, you're onto something, but I can't say. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting to hear that.
Can't admit it. I do want to say the one thing about, I guess the I don't even know what the word was, but the accusation of David's occultism and kind of ritual ceremony thing. When he makes this statement that like he has a soft spot for the Antichrist, like maybe I just interpreted that wrong, but I interpreted that from a screenwriting perspective. Like, so he has like a soft spot for people using the Antichrist concept and writing about it. I didn't really, if he was a Christian and all that, he has a soft spot for the Antichrist, which is like, it's a guy he would like to have a beer with and get to know sometime. I thought he meant, specifically using the concept in writing was how I took it, you know what I mean? But I suppose it's open to interpretation. A couple other cases I want to throw out there real quick just before Dan goes. The Michael Rupert case, the guy who created the Collapse book and documentary, he supposedly committed suicide. I mean, apparently that one is confirmed, but with the content that he was covering in Collapse, I have to say that that's highly questionable. And also Hunter S. Thompson, the timing of his suicide. Again, he's covered a lot of, kind of inflammatory stuff, but he was writing the Kingdom of Fear book about 9/11 and the Bush administration response to 9/11. So, I mean, this whole suicide thing comes up a lot is basically, the whole point I'm trying to make. Or you just have something like Malcolm X where they're just going to blame some guys that literally were nowhere to be found when the actual event happens. But thank Dan very much. I want to thank him for his work on the case and also helping out Greg with the Gray Stage book and spending time with us here today. Definitely shout out to all the truthers in the group, and make sure you guys keep following Greg and Dan's work in the group. Been a grand old time having you boys. I do have some more. I want to go back into the screenplay with Greg because I have my opinion coming, and I honestly thought it needed some work, man. Like I saw a very working status form in the script, which again we don't know. This could be literally the first prototype, right? Because we don't know if this is I would say it doesn't appear to be a final copy, but man, I for $60,000 into and what we saw with the concept trailer, man, I expected a lot more from the screenplay, man. Like I was really excited that was going to be on, blockbuster level, especially, with the amount of detail that's in the concept trailer, that's where I was at with it.
Well, they made that trailer for $6,000, and that was back in 2012.
Right. Absolutely.
And if you look at the concept trailer, it's very, very different from David's script, from the May 12 script, But whatever our view is on David Crowley's script, the main thing is that script is what created that deal. That was
for sure.
For
sure.
So
well, I mean, I would say the concept trailer created the deal. But obviously, he's not selling them a couple-minute concept trailers. You said he's selling them a feature film screenplay. So
you're right.
I totally agree.
Yeah, you're definitely right on that. Yeah.
Because if you get 3 million views, it's much easier to say like, "Hey, dude, this got millions." Like it's not. You're not going to it with a 200-view trailer. Like it's really good. Trust me.
Well, that would be the other thing too, I guess, is to go back and look at before everybody found out that David Crowley died, how many views did that trailer have, and then after his death, how many did it generate? But I still think it's at least 1 million, 2 million views before he died. I forget.
Yeah, that's what I think. It's like between 1 million, 1.5 million after, and then that's like you said, a Gray State with the botch rise coming out. Obviously, you guys as group and a lot of other. Not that you guys are necessarily. You guys are following the case. You're not necessarily saying, "Hey, go watch the concept trailer," but I assume a lot of people are finding it from you guys' research if they hadn't previously heard of it.
Yeah, they definitely are. Yeah, I don't know. I really liked it. I really thought that the script. There was a few things that I would have taken out. I think. The one thing that we learn is everything in that script has to make sense. It has to lead you into the next scene. And there were a couple things that I thought that he could have taken out but that's just small nitpicky things too. But I really thought that if you were to take out the fall of the dollar and replace it with what we're seeing now, you pretty much have what is happening now.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm not arguing with the relevancy, you know what I mean? And also, you know, the other problem with it is a lot, that whole pre-apocalyptic martial law, Mark of the Beast. I mean, all of those things are stuff that like Alex Jones covered in like, you know, Police State 2000. Like, and I'm not just saying, you know, that was David's one resource. There's like a million documentaries that cover that stuff. You know what I mean? My whole problem is, like you said, it's very different for the concept trailer. And if what you're pitching us is these concepts for the concept trailer, but then you take out the Masonic beheading because maybe that's too inflammatory. You take out the public. There was certain imagery that I was expecting to see in the feature film, because it was like these big moments in the trailer. You're like, it was what I'm talking about is impact, the emotional impact I had from seeing the visuals. And like you said, I think they covered it in a Gray State too, when you see those black armored FEMA troopers kind of beating down the peasants, you know what I mean? And then Time magazine basically has a cover that is something that you've seen in the Gray State trailer, and it kind of has that kind of mainstream imagery. I was expecting to, you know, to really see that. And what I felt really lacked was like the emotion. Like, I didn't feel this emotion from the screenplay that was a impending doom of the suppression of our freedom. If what we're talking about is the whole collapse, but before our eyes, that comes with a very emotional, like, you're going to walk outside your door and you're going to be on your own. No one is going to come to save you. Not the police, not the National Guard, not FEMA, you know what I mean? Not only that, to take it a step further, you might be an enemy. You might be a non-combatant. So then, like, not only are you fighting for your own survival, you are fighting oppression, you know? And that's that. I felt, not to say that they couldn't sell it to these Hollywood writers that a lot of people were saying in the group, but
the big thing, one thing that we need to, I mean, the script starts out, right? Well, I mean, it starts out in Afghanistan first, so they're chasing Osama bin Laden. He gets away, blah, blah, blah. But when the movie really starts, the collapse has already happened. So they're already under this. So so David's character, Daniel Walker, is already there, and the twist is when he becomes the person who is a victim of a false flag. So there is a bombing that happens, and he's blamed for it. And so then it's like, okay, why would they ever blame him for it? Now, if you watch the first scene, and if you watch some of that stuff, you kind of get a glimpse. So I get that there's pieces missing, because it's like, okay, what made him so special that they had to blame him for this false flag? I think the tie that David Crowley, the writer, was trying to make was that they were after him for whatever he did in Afghanistan.
For sure.
And looking at the David Crowley case, speaking with some soldiers who are very reluctant to go public about David Crowley and all of that, there have been some weird theories about things that happened when David Crowley served, and that things that he might have seen, people that might have been killed, curses that might have happened to these people who ran over children over in Afghanistan, things like that. Theories. All obviously that stuff you won't find in my book. There is a lot that you will not find in this particular book. But you know, that's a big rabbit hole. When you start thinking about what did David Crowley go through while he served at the worst possible time. I mean, think about that. What, 2005 to 2009? That's horrible. I mean, this is right after September 11th. This is right when they go in there. There is so many stories that you could talk with any soldier who served over there during that time. It's hell. It was hell.
I mean, I'll put it like this, you know, since we've been dealing with this whole fiasco, and I mean all of us, you know, I've been following it. You and Dan have been on the front line when this, you know, obviously, if you guys don't know, I was an investor in the crowdfunding, and it's like, for me, it's like, all I ever asked is that, you know, I would have loved to have a conversation with Danny August Mason about what is the plan for the project, given that you guys got $60,000+ it crashed and burned, this thing happened to David, it's copyrighted, so the script can't move for 70 years, blah, blah, blah. I would have loved to have that discussion, because if you would have ever had that dialogue with him, I would have definitely given that question to you, like, dude, ask him this. And, you know, when I mentioned that I did this Champion of Liberty perk for $1,000, which, you know, I make enough money independently in music that I'm able to do such things. I know a lot of people can't, but we talked about it when I came on with you and Dan way back when. Someone put $10,000 into this crowdfunding campaign, and with Sean Wright and Eric Sayward or whoever else messaging you guys on Facebook and threatening you guys that they're going to do something. Bro, if I put $10,000 into your crowdfunding campaign and you guys freaking shelved the project, I would have been Googling every single one of your addresses and showing up to your door, knocking on your front door to have a conversation, bro. I would have went down the list, and I would have had a face-to-face with every single. The $1,000 I can eat, and it's whatever, because like I said, I'm a screenwriter myself. I have my own crew where we do these kind of stuff. And so I was kind of thinking, not something I would ever say on camera, hint, 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 but if I were to write a similar project, I would think about dedicating it to David to try to get this done how I would get it done. And I see what you're saying about David using his personal influences, and of course he has to use his own personal experience to write. That's the only way that you can write, right? But right. I also felt that it somewhat lost focus with the whole Iraq and Afghanistan bin Laden thing. I know that David used that through line because that's his personal experience. Makes perfect sense for him writing it. For me writing it, I think I would avoid bin Laden and Iraq and Afghanistan altogether, because at one point it's slightly outdated at this time, and for two, if you already don't know about that stuff, I don't think it's necessary to helping you understand pre-apocalyptic dystopian fall of the fabric of the government, or whatever we're talking about here, the collapse of capitalism. You know what I mean?
Right. Give me 1 second, guys. I'll be right back. Hold on.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to have to actually go in a couple of minutes, guys. It's 12:30 here, and so we are going to have to wrap things up in a moment. For sure, no worries. Do you have anything else on that stuff, guys? No, I'm to be honest with you, and this is to everyone watching, listen. I'll be straight up. I'm completely out of my depth because I'm a complete noob to this, and I don't really know anything about it. Like I said, I watched the documentary on Netflix. I've read a couple of articles. I'm still I've just come out even more confused. There's definitely, as I've repeated throughout the show, there's definitely something missing. But I don't have that knowledge, you know, about everything related to it. What's going on? I just think, though, it's interesting that the guys have been approaching it with many different angles, you know, from paranormal to whatever, and it's not going on a conspiracy theories, just saying, hey, we're asking questions here, there's more to this, we just want to try and find out basically what happened.
Well, I mean, you know that, like, how long I followed this basically this discussion.
Yeah, I haven't, bro. So
well, at least with the project, I mean, this discussion me and Greg are having is interesting because of the concept trailer. I was a David Crowley Gray State fan, and Greg wasn't. Now that this so-called revision version of the feature film has left, now me and Greg have kind of reversed positions because he really liked it, and I thought that it needed a lot of work. You know what I mean? So it's kind of hilarious. Like, I was this huge fanboy of the trailer, like, oh my God, that's the best trailer I've ever seen. Greg knows I was a Gray State fan. He reads it and he's like, I thought this was a really interesting screenplay, one of the best I've ever read. And then I read it and I'm like, dude, I thought that it needed a lot of work. Like, I probably wouldn't even invested, you know, I mean, because stuff like this, I've heard people throw around, you know, like, I wish Mike was still with us because, you know, for some of the stories that we're familiar with, Mike is working on a film called Townies. It's an Irish crime kind of film. You know, I think it was even, what is that Matt Damon movie with Robin Williams? When he's the teacher, Good Will Hunting, right? Yeah. So the Good Will Hunting, that was I think that was sold for like $600,000 when they first pitched it. So I mean, for like a Hollywood screenplay, it's like 50, 60,000. You know, is about like ballpark for you know, for that kind of offer. So it's just interesting for some guy to, you know, invest 10K and for them to get like around 60, 65, like, and then some guy was trolling you, Greg, saying like, oh, 30 million? Oh, that's like a Hollywood comedy movie. Like, let's put that into perspective for that dude, because he had no idea what he's talking about. Terminator 1, as Caesar said, guys, was like an $800,000 or $900,000 budget. Granted, it was the 80s, and, you know, the blockbuster wasn't a thing yet, blah, blah, blah. But what I'm saying is action sci-fis have been made for less than $1 million. So don't try to come to us and, you know, John Wick, I think I was telling you guys before. John Wick had issues around $20-30 million. Keanu Reeves invested his own money to get it finished. John Wick 1. Now, and that was basically considered like a indie Hollywood film for their standard. You know what I mean? So when people throw around these 30 million, 60 millions, blah blah blah. But yeah, it's just Greg, I found it super unfocused. I didn't the characters, I didn't really have any emotional attachment to any of them. Like even the villains, like I'm like, I gotta hate the villains, you know what I mean? Especially in something where we're coming and taking your freedom away. These guys need to be the most like heartless of all time. Now, not to say David couldn't have tightened all this stuff up and got it ready, but it's just like, and I found it super unfocused. Even the Native American theme, like I appreciate the concept of him putting the Lakotas in there, but what I would have liked to have seen, I wish we had Mac with us, guys, is the natives are people who were completely exterminated by European colonists. You know what I mean? What I would have liked to have seen is that same fighting spirit that they were fighting for their literal existence with during colonization against this totalitarian government. I would have liked to seen that come out. I would have liked to seen those Lakota rituals to add. You know, he writes like the Lakota performs a Lakota prayer over the body. I got to see the actual ritual, and I got to know the purpose of it, because I would have liked to actually seen the Lakota spirit. You know what I mean? That was missing from that Lakota theme. Like, so I'm not saying he didn't put things in there that I thought were good, but I just didn't see any like extrapolation on it as opposed to. Also, I mean, I know we said we weren't sure what we were going to do about the spoilers. When the whole revolution gets behind Daniel, like, dude, I gotta see a reason for that. It can't just be like, hey, there's one guy out there getting false flagged and he's fighting the revolution by himself. We're all gonna go follow him. Like, I gotta see what he did to win them. You know, it's just like certain cliches, like you were saying. Like, I felt there was just like certain cliches in there that are like, dude, it's too predictable. Like, you could see that coming from a mile away. You got to get us emotionally invested, and then we got to feel it. And like I said, who knows? Maybe this is a super early prototype. But I don't necessarily agree that if you just sold it to a bunch of Hollywood writers, they would have fixed everything right away. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying maybe if David took it to the right people and they gave him the right feedback, I think all that stuff would have been tightened up to the point of, and maybe for a series, if it's like 3 or 4 series, you know, that's like 10 episodes each. So maybe you would have seen all that stuff play out over the story arcs, you know what I mean? But, yeah, I thought it needed major work, man. And, you know, maybe I'm just being too critical because we've been waiting 10 years. So maybe I made the standard too high for myself. But like, I was like, the talent that I saw in the concept trailer, I would literally say that as far as filmmaking, I know he was an early filmmaker. I'd literally say David was probably a genius. However, maybe that was more of a directing talent that came across in the concept trailer as opposed to screenwriting. It's literally a completely other a different talent than what directing is. Now, you do have some screenwriter directors in Hollywood, guys like Stanley Kubrick and Ridley Scott, but not always. You got to keep in mind, a lot of those Hollywood directors just, you know, Scarface, for instance, you have somebody else write it for you, and then Brian De Palma directs it. You know what I mean? You see what I'm saying? So doing both is very, very difficult. I don't expect some starting out guy to just get in there and knock them both out and amaze us. You know? Correct. So
sadly, guys, I got to wrap up. It's 12:35 a.m. for me here now. Okay,
so well, thank you.
If you know, we can do a follow-up show. I know you don't want to cut off your response to Ross there. I do want to jump on one thing as a nerd, and I noticed it. Especially being into martial arts and stuff myself, immediately when you said I'm into martial arts movies, like see more fights, well, being as somebody who's into all of that and watches all of those kind of movies too, I immediately gravitated to that and thought, right, I want to ask him about martial arts movies. One Time, your love and passion of them. I watch a ridiculous amount of them. Even that series, the recent series, which I've been talking about all the time on recent shows, Warrior, set in San Francisco in I think the 19th century. We've got all the Chinese gangs fighting with the Irish gangs for control of San Fran. Awesome. But yeah, I better shut up or I'll make myself even late. I can talk about that stuff all day.
Yeah, well, I believe it was Jeet Kune Do, which was the martial art. Yeah, definitely. The Jeet Kune Do was what Danny August Mason studied, which is the Bruce Lee martial art, as you know, guys, which is what they were going for Gray State, which I think would have been original because you don't see it a lot on screen. I would say that was definitely, obviously David comes from a military background, so I'd say the whole, like, when he described like the military stuff, the Iraq, the Afghanistan, the hand-to-hand combat, the guns and the weapons, as Greg was saying, I think that was what he did best. But as for everything else, which is like the story arcs and the emotion and the dialogue, I mean, that's what a screenplay is. So you could definitely see what his strengths were. And I think that would have, you know, if they went to set, David would have been the military advisor, you know what I mean? Because that's who, you know, make sure everything is accurate on set. Like guys are holding the, you know, weapons correctly and all the equipment and everything. So you could see, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I look forward to a part 2, and we're gonna we can dive a little bit.
Yeah, let's do a post game. If you want to have me and Gaz on, you know, over on the Gray stage, we can come over there and do a post game with you. If you want to come, you guys want to come back with us. However, you guys want to do it.
And also, Greg, if you just want to come on one time for a general discussion on the movies and music as well, even the creative process, we often get off topic. One of our co-hosts, Caesar, shout out to Caesar of Sea Dark Films. We do that with everybody. We just look for an excuse, and then we greenlit like yes.
Wait for him to say action movies.
Yeah,
okay, he said it.
That's pretty much it. But
Sounds good.
You know, it certainly would be an interesting topic, especially chatting about indie film now, where it seems to be. And again, this would be a debate for a whole other show, but with Disney pretty much owning most of the movie industry, and it's getting harder and harder for other properties to get out there now. I did creative writing and screenwriting at school myself, graduated 2 years ago, so it's something I'm very interested in. I do want to send shouts to everybody. I know I've missed some folks. Shout out to Catherine, Sophia, Steve, aka MC Therapist, Alphabetic as well.
Yes, sir. Didn't see it there.
Mike O'Day as well. Thanks for coming through, man. Reach out to Ross if you want to come on the show as well. I know we had you on way back in the day. Of course, thanks to Dan for joining us, and anybody who's listened or listens back in the podcast. Very interesting for sure, and yeah, definitely lots out there. So do you just want to shout out where people can find you on the internet, Greg, for us just before we pop off?
Real quick, one thing before that, just a question for the fans and the group. Okay. So since it looks like Gray Steak is never happening, if someone was going to do a similar kind of project, would you guys want to see it? That would be a question for the fans. And then Greg, let everybody know where they can find you, where
Greg Fernandez Jr. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And also, is it thegraystage.wordpress or just Gray Stage?
Thegraystage.wordpress.com. That's right.
Yeah, and a Gray Stage YouTube channel as well. Subscribe there. Go get Greg's book. It's the hard copies. You have the link are on a specific site and the free download PDF.
Yeah, the hard copy is on lulu.com, and I'll make sure that everybody has that. But if you go to the website, follow the link, you'll definitely find it.
Greg's enjoying a little red wine. I think I'm going to go get a drink myself. I might have a couple things after this.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys. I really appreciate your help with this. Thank you so much.
Nah, it was overdue, man. I've been working with you guys for like 5-6 years, and
I know, right?
do like a weekly show, and you guys do a weekly show, and it never occurs to us like, hey, maybe we should do it together. Anyway, stay tuned for part 2. Shout out to Greg and Dan. Subscribe, all of us. Follow all of us. Yeah. And another successful show. Shout out to the fans who came through.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for everybody for supporting it. Everyone stay safe at the moment as well. And we'll get through this, and we'll be okay. And just look out for each other and stay safe, y'all. Talk to you soon.
We never got to ask them about COVID-19, but that's okay. I'm not really. There's been enough about it.
I'm not going anywhere.
Neither are we. One thing, quick, guys. I just want everyone to shout out the channel American Spy Fox. That kid does an awesome Nirvana Kurt Cobain series. I'm going to try to get him for an interview as well. I'll send his channel over to Greg and Dan if they want to follow that stuff.
Yeah,
it's really good. Check that out, guys. All right, thank you, everybody. Ancient Vision stuff.
All right, thanks all. Peace.
Respect.